Next is item number 3, the consideration of the minutes of the February 28th, 2022 Village Board virtual meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. A second.
Second.
Thank you. Any changes? So thank you. Clerk, please call the roll.
It's a voice vote.
It's a voice
Voice
or
vote.
voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Next is item number 4, non-agenda items and visitors. The village president and board of trustees allocates 15 minutes during this item for those individuals who would like the opportunity to address the village board of trustees on any matter not listed on the agenda. Each person addressing the village board of trustees is asked to limit their comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. Mickey, would you like to address us? Thank you. Please state your name and your address.
Mickey Collins, 217 East Scranton Avenue. So it was about 9 months ago that I came in front of you with my little slide presentation pleading for trees in Lake Bluff and planting more because so many are being lost to disease, being cut down for various reasons. And I just thought, I took a look at the new budget that I think you're going to be discussing very soon here. And I did see that the budget for new trees has gone up, but it is only $22,500. So if you think of what we're spending on so many other areas in the village, I question whether that's adequate. We talked about, and I know Drew's talked about this with me, about trying to get a net gain of 500 trees planted. And if we're going to use the small trees that are very affordable, the little native trees that Public Works is very excited about actually planting because they can go out with 2 guys and a shovel and do a lot of them in a day, and they're not expensive. But we need to get them planted ASAP because they need a few years before they have any presence in our village at all. So I don't want to take much time, but I just want all of you, as you look at this new budget, and then you think about the other things we're spending money on in the village, and just see if we've got the right balance going, and are we providing Public Works with an adequate budget to really get our street trees replanted. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Collins.
Mr. President, there are 5 other individuals on the attending virtually, and no one's raised their hand yet to chime in at this time for general public comment on items not on the agenda, but if somebody wants to, they can certainly raise their hand and they can be identified.
Thank you.
And nobody's raising their hand.
We'll move on to the next item, that is item number 5. The village board sets the order of a meeting. The village president and board of trustees will entertain requests from anyone present on the order of business to be conducted during the village board meeting. So I understand that items 16 and 20 are requested to be first. Any comments? All right. We'll move on to item number 16. That is a resolution approving a sign code exemption for Ferry Lake Forest at 990 North Shore Drive. Is there a motion to approve the ordinance?
So moved.
The resolution, I'm sorry, this is a resolution.
So moved.
Thank you. A second.
Second.
Thank you. Ferry Lake Forest, formerly Lake Forest Sports Car, is proposing to replace 4 signs and alter 2 other signs in order to comply with the Ferry corporate mandate to change the logo from a black horse silhouette to a chrome horse. In February of 2017, Lake Forest Sports Car had received approval for the existing signs, including sign code exemptions for the size of a ground sign, the number of wall signs, and the size of the informational sign. Although non-conforming signs can be altered, the replacement of non-conforming signs requires the exemption to be granted again. The plans were presented to the Architectural Board of Review on March 1st. The ABR recommended approval of the sign code exemption by a vote of 5-0. The ABR has the authority to approve signs which conform to the sign code, but only to make a recommendation to the village board for signs which require an exemption. Questions, comments?
The owner is here today if there's any questions. I don't know if people have met Rick Mancuso, but I've been a great corporate resident and supporter of the community.
Well, I think you'll like what we're doing, because we're taking down the backlit boxes, the yellow background with the
Yeah.
black Cavallino. And those are all being replaced with a polished aluminum prancing horse, the Cavallino backlit. So it's a softer, less lit look. I think you'll like it. It'll blend in with the rest of the signs. And they're making this change from lowercase to uppercase on the ground mounted sign. It was originally uppercase, they changed it to lowercase, and now we're back to uppercase. This is the Italian way, so. No other explanation for that than to simply throw it out there.
Any questions?
But I should tell you that we've been recognized as one of their top 3 locations in the world,
Nice.
which I think is a great testimony to everything that we've done here with your cooperation and the way it's looked and turned out. So, I mean, we're pretty proud of that. And we just received an award a week or so ago from Ferrari at the annual dealer meeting as the #1 dealer in the United States.
That's
In
awesome.
facility and appearance and approach and service and so forth. So we take it all very seriously, and we've tried very hard to follow all the guidelines to blend very smoothly and easily into the community here.
Well, I have a question. So this is Ferrari of Lake Forest, but it's located in Bluff.
We had those discussions.
Yeah.
I think they would love
I
to trade
understand why.
places. They'd love to have the sales tax dollars.
They get the name, we'll take the dollars. Fair trade.
We're just fine being called Lake Forest in this case.
I'm sorry?
We're just fine being called Lake Forest in this case.
Really like I like the new chrome look. I thought it looked really nice.
It's a great look. It's soft, and, maybe at some point it would be interesting for us to get together. Maybe we should do that. It's probably long overdue to see what we've done inside. We've had some significant updates. Ferrari's a bit of a fashion company now, so everything that they've done on the inside is done for a reason. It mimics their showroom in New York on Park Avenue and what's been designed in Italy. So we've had both the pleasure and the lunacy of working with architects in Rome on this latest one. So that's been a bit of a challenge, but the end result's been terrific, so.
Would that include a test drive
Yes,
of your F40?
cocktails afterwards.
That's what I'm looking
Test
for.
drives first, cocktails
Can
afterwards.
only end poorly.
That's
You know
right.
what? I'll get together with Drew and we'll get something on the agenda for that.
That'd be great.
I would love to show it to you because you should feel real good about it.
It's beautiful.
Me too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great, thanks.
Makes
and
sense.
Thanks for hearing us early as well.
With this, if there are no more questions,
Voice vote.
it's a voice vote. Anyone,
All in favor?
all in favor, I'm sorry.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the resolution passes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Next item is item number 20. And that would be an ordinance granting a special use permit to CMP Management LLC to operate a membership sports and recreation club at 42 Sherwood Terrace, Suite Number 2, The Farm. Is there a motion to approve the ordinance?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Thank you. On February 14, 2022, the Village of Lake Bluff received a zoning relief application from CMP Management LLC, the applicant, to allow a membership sports and recreation club, The Farm, to operate on the L1 Light Industry District. The application proposes the establishment of a farm, a 26,000 square foot indoor turf facility for youth and adult exercise and athlete practices, lessons, and sports. Staff understands the facility would be operated on a membership basis. The subject tenant space was most recently used as warehousing for a disaster recovery firm, and the remainder of a building estimated to 7,600 square feet was and remains leased to an office user who has control over the front parking lot during typical office hours. As its March 10th meeting, the PCZBA conducted a public hearing to consider the variation and unanimously recommended that the village board grant the requested relief with a number of conditions, including a walking path. If the front parking area is used as an additional shared parking for the farm, the applicant must provide a separate entrance or separate walking path for pedestrians to reach the primary entrance in the rear. Pedestrians must not be directed to use the vehicle driveway as a walking path. Architectural board of review. Prior to commencement of a use, the applicant should be required receive the approval of the ARB for the following items through its typical site plans approval process. Additional lighting in any area used for shared or dedicated parking, as well as pedestrian circulation. The lighting plan should be consistent with dark sky principles and limit light trespass across the southerly lot line of a property. Next, a final parking and circulation plan, and finally, an enclosure for all trash and recycling receptacles serving for property. Last, a site preparation. The driveway and rear parking lot must be resurfaced prior to the commencement of a use. All debris must be cleared from the side and rear of a building prior to the commencement of a use. Questions on the board?
Just one point of clarification. Earlier today, we circulated an updated ordinance to make crystal clear there was a difference in what was originally posted in the packet under section 4, conditions of approval in the ordinance, item D, rather than the language that was previously circulated dealing with when site plan review should occur. The ordinance that's in front of you tonight that would be considered is the one where it's triggered that prior to the issuance of a building permit, that the applicant would prepare a formal site plan review process. I think it was talked about when that date would happen, and we talked about it internally, and it should occur before occupancy consideration. It just needs to happen because there's a lot of site issues with this, so.
I had a question, just looking at the, near the last page, there's a sketch that's done in pencil where it describes where the front offices are, where the parking stalls would be, and then the flow of pedestrians using two options for the walking path. And my question is, it looks like both options are flush against the building, and that there are potential for, there is the roadway or the place where the cars are going to be going right next to it. So would there be bollards or any type of separation?
Originally for that, we were gonna do bollards to separate the driveway.
Could you please state your name?
Oh, sorry, John Seaman.
Thank you.
From CMP Management, thank you. Originally, I was looking at doing bollards to protect the pedestrians from traffic. But after the meeting on Thursday, I discussed with the owner of the building, and we came up with an alternative option, which I have a preliminary sketch of. If you would like, I could hand that out to you.
I'm very curious. I mean, I've had kids and trying to wrangle them to go to someplace and then from someplace, and,
It's,
you know, just,
safety is
yeah.
number one here.
Yeah.
We don't want anyone getting injured. So what I'm looking at doing is,
Here, I'll
on the
take-
east side
I'll
of the
take- you
building,
can-
there's another entrance, right after the front offices, which you would be able to pull in from the west entrance off of Sherwood, go in front of the building, drop off at the far west side, and would be a pathway probably, I didn't measure it, I would say 35 feet long, that would go into the side entrance, which actually would become the main entrance of the building. And there's a grassed area in between there, there's an easement, it doesn't need to be right on top of the building. I could do an overhang over the door. It makes more sense. So then therefore, no one's pulling in the back, no one would be turning around in dark areas.
right.
And anyone coming that is 16 or over that would be parking a vehicle could also still use the rear parking lot, but not passing any walking pedestrians. The owner also said that the front parking spots would be available to me from 4 o'clock on, which ideally would be the only time that people would probably be showing up due to school hours. You know, holidays and stuff like that, the offices won't be used. And those spots typically now, because of COVID, a lot of people are working from home. So maybe half are being in use by the current employees there.
Thank you. That is exactly what I was concerned about, and I think you've addressed that.
And I do have meetings set up for my landscape architect and designer, John Mariani, but because of timing and busyness and spring, and so that's going to happen at the end of this month.
Thank you.
So both this site plan and your landscaping plan would be submitted to the AB Architecture Board of Review as part of your site plan review?
Correct, yes. So the main issue was to see if actually this use would be approved in this area before we started incurring more cost.
Right.
And is this use an admitted use at this point? I would assume.
This paves the way for that because it grants a special use permit.
Oh, I see.
So this is first reading of the ordinance.
Yeah, and then in the surrounding area, there's a couple other fitness companies. There's the Racket Club. It's going from this warehouse industrial area to more of a commercial, not commercial use, but a everyday use with, you got the Lake Forest vet that moved in. This will be not the farm of Lake Forest, it will just be the farm.
That's funny.
You done?
Yeah.
Okay. I had a really quick question, just, so I saw the letter from Scouts Baseball.
Yes.
And I think it's great that you're pulling in members already, but will there also be space for other members? It won't just be for Lake Forest Baseball?
No, not just for Lake Forest Baseball. I am going to address then Lake Bluff Baseball. It's geared for both Lake Forest and Lake Bluff community baseball leagues. So what I'm looking to do is cap the memberships just so it doesn't get overcrowded.
Okay.
I wanted to do maybe 400 individual memberships
Okay.
and 500 team memberships. So a team membership would be like the LFBA where you get a discount if they bring the whole team. And then the dues just get added onto the dues of the
Yeah.
club membership.
Fantastic. And you really did get a nice letter from Dr. McKenna. He
Oh,
sent a
yeah,
nice letter.
he's a good friend, and also Mr. Mancuso, Adam, I talked to him a lot about this.
Yeah.
And I know Ernie Samersky very well, and Axel Canals, too.
Any more questions?
I just had a comment. I think it's, the use of the property is good in one respect, but in another, I think we should be mindful of the 2023 strategic plan, which is in the, mentioned in the packet, that, we should be encouraging businesses in the business park that generate sales tax revenue. So my question is, memberships don't, is there anything about this that will generate more than property tax revenue for the village?
There is, so there's hopefully, once like these team members come in, so take the Scouts, for example, just because I do have a letter of intent, and if I ended up doing feeder baseball, which is the 12 years, and it's 13-year-olds and 14-year-olds, I would offer uniforms through there. There's gloves, any type of equipment that you could use. Thinking of like for the younger kids, 8 years old, that are just getting into this, doing promotion days with Wilson's or Rawlings, where they come in and actually get the proper equipment so that it enhances their ability to learn to play the game properly. And then the sales tax would actually go back to the city then too.
Got it.
And that doesn't end in baseball. There's lacrosse, football, basketball, you know.
Right. So that's, it sounds like this is geared towards kids that are on a track, because knowing someone who owned a sporting goods store, an independent one, it's difficult to compete in the marketplace. So you're catering to children who are training for something greater, and therefore that would be a captive audience for you, because they want the best equipment. They're not going to go elsewhere. So you're thinking that that's what you're trying to do, is get them the best equipment they can have for the age appropriate, because there's so much competition for
Correct,
sports
and there's so much competition.
online, et cetera.
The problem is, you know, we're making these kids make these decisions at such a young age and where they are. So that's why I want to be multi-sport, not just focused on baseball. That's why the basketball's in there. But I want them to be able to have the correct equipment and the correct tools too, the proper coaching, how to throw properly so you're not having Tommy John surgery at age 12. or stuff like that. Yeah, it's a problem, but yes, geared towards someone that's on track, but then can also keep these kids in our communities playing for our feeder teams that go on to our high school teams to make them more competitive versus leaving and going to a Lake County Lightning or a top tier where they have these facilities, they have around the year training, 12 months a year on a certain sport at a level that they know they want to go to high school. That's what's needed these days to be competitive.
Yeah, oh, I'm aware, that's good. Well, that was my biggest
Yep.
issue, just because the business park is a source of the majority of the revenue for the village. The west side of town is actually.
Understand.
And so, given the strategic plan of 2023, I would think that we would want to be mindful of that when we're discussing any reuse of property in the business park. So
Yeah,
thank you.
and some of the gear can get pretty pricey, so they're.
Yeah, oh, I'm aware. Yeah.
Thank you. You know what? Not having grown up here, I completely missed the point of what you were trying to achieve, so thank you very much.
He'll sell ski equipment
Oh,
too.
my gosh. I could just say.
And we could put a golf simulator in there.
Yeah, the level of convenience that would bring to have a facility like that so close.
Yeah.
And the ability to buy gear and such right there while you're there. It's, from a mother's perspective, it's very nice.
One less trip you have to take.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
nice amenity for the community.
And I know safety is the utmost importance, and, image is everything, so it needs to look good on the outside. It's going to be nice on the inside. The turf is actually the same company that did Hallis Hall, the Philadelphia Eagles, so it's million-dollar athletes are playing on this turf, so it would be safe for them, too.
It's very nice.
It's neat.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
And any more questions on the board?
No.
So John, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So it is going to be a voice vote if we do not have more questions. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So thank you. The motion, the ordinance passes. Thank you.
On first reading.
On the first reading. And we are now resuming the normal order of business by item number six, and that would be the warrant reports for March 1st to March 14, 2022, and February 2022 payroll expenditures. Is there a motion to approve the warrant report?
So moved?
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Thank you. As a summary of background and reason for request, expenditures of village funds for payments of invoice in the amount of $425,796.55 for March 1st to March 14, 2022, and expenditures of village funds for payment of payroll in the amount of $340,968.06 for February 2022, for total expenditures of $766,764.61. Reports and documents attached are: number one, the warrant report for March 1st, March 14, 2022, again for $425,796.55, dated 3/1/3/14/22. The invoice register report shows checks with a status of open or paid. All checks with a status of open are computer-generated checks for the board's final approval. Checks with a status of paid are checks processed manually. And number two, the fiscal year 2020 to 2021 payroll report. Any questions, any comments on the board?
Should that be the FY 21-22 payroll report?
Just right here.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Any additional questions?
No.
Looking at the warrants?
I had just brought up with Drew in an earlier conversation today, the payment to Lauterbach for $100 because I was unaware of what they were doing for us. And so, just so people know that if they're looking, that was true for,
Really where we've parceled out the various activities that there are, we used to have a full-time assistant finance director position, and they've been picking up the majority of that work at a lower cost.
yep. Thank you.
I had a really quick question about the Ferguson Group. So I know that's our consulting group for grants, and we pay them $2,000 a month. The additional $750. So then when they actually write a grant for us, is there additional monies then that we have to pay?
Yes, but they did not write a grant. That was the grant that staff put together and they reviewed that we submitted for the Block 1 work. That was their review of that and comments they gave us on that. That's how that agreement's set up. That was the only grant that we had anticipated in this time frame where we were kind of like testing them out, so to speak. You
Okay.
know, and we wanted to give them a shot at doing that, but not writing the grant. They quoted us, I want to say it was something like $13,000 to write the grant.
Oh.
So we said, well, how would you edit it? So it's always easier to edit. So that was
So the $2,000 that we pay them monthly is
It's a
to
subscription.
find- It's like a subscription, and they're actively looking for grants for us?
Yes, most
And then-
certainly.
Okay.
Yeah, and we have conversations with them monthly and a review of things that they've sent us, what else has popped up, what's coming in the future.
Okay.
And so, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And at what point do we feel like there's a good evaluation, time period, so that you've got enough information that you can really evaluate how much we want to continue with that service? What is that time frame?
We're hoping 6 months. That's what we've been through so far.
Okay,
So
great.
And where are we right now?
it'll conclude at the end of this fiscal year. So we're getting close to being done with it.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. If there are no more questions, this is a roll call.
Trustee Brand,
Aye.
Trustee Markey,
Aye.
Trustee Rappin,
Aye.
Trustee Ryder,
Aye.
Trustee Inkman.
Aye.
Thank you. Next is our village administrator's report regarding tonight the Lake Bluff mosquito abatement district concerning available funds for mosquito control services.
Thank you. So, yeah, this is the only item I have under my report this evening. And so the village has been contemplating the Lake Bluff Mosquito Abatement District coming to an end, and they are making progress in that regards. And you can see from the attached correspondence from the trustee and dissolution, Robert Massini. He's asked the village within a 30-day timeframe to let him know whether or not the village is going to take our proportionate share of the funds of the assets, the leftover assets of the Lake Bluff Mosquito Abatement District, which is roughly $130,000. The village, like I said, has been talking about taking over services to some degree, and so I'm recommending we accept these funds towards that end.
And if our scope of work is not, nailed down at this point, because there are lots of things to kind of weigh, the impact of what we're doing and the desire of the residents to receive certain services, there's no string attached to that money in that we have to use it within a certain amount of time or for specific activities, but the nature of it is that it would go into the general fund, and then we would determine through the budget cycle how much and through what means we would spend for mosquito abatement.
The use is, I think, is limited to mosquito abatement mosquito abatement activities, whether that be, I'll call it monitoring. And then the next level, you can talk about the larviciding, then you get into adulticide and by various means, whether it be by hand, truck, or airplane, or helicopter. But yeah, so it would have to be those types of services on how the dollars were spent. But to my knowledge, they shall be spent within 36 months. There's no timeline associated with them.
Okay, and how do we carve that out? Is it just a separate, sub-account of a fund, in the general fund? Is it easily ascertained what our, level of spending is? Because in theory, at some point, when we figure out our scope, we'll have to figure out if we need to add to it, what is the life cycle of what we're planning on doing?
Right, and Finance Director O'Connell and I had a conversation about this. We talked with the Sikich, who is our auditor, and Bettina, their comments.
Sure. Their comments were it depends on how we address the levy and the funding of the mosquito abatement expenses. So if we choose to levy taxes, then monies would need to be restricted and deposited into a separate fund and tracked in that regard. If we don't, and they just become part of the general fund, then we just kind of track them on our own and spend them as wouldn't be needed for the mosquito abatement expenses.
So to be determined how we manage it in the future.
Right. Okay, so we can either absorb it through the general fund or say we want to additionally levy, and that would be outside of our, you know,
Other activities.
the complex calculation of where we're capped for PTEL.
Correct.
Right, so it's not
'Cause it's new
within
activity.
PTEL. It's a new thing.
Right.
Thank you. And that's why we would want it outside that, so that we could,
Take advantage of that opportunity, so to
well,
speak.
just know what our tools are.
Right, that's right. Probably better said that way.
Is there, so you're saying there are limitations to what we can do with it, but there's no time limit for when we need to spend $132,000?
My understanding is there's no time limit.
Okay.
But we have to do it to facilitate mosquito abatement.
Understood. But that, defining that does not mean that we are obligated to use pesticides. We can simply monitor.
In my understanding of it, yes.
Because I think there's less and less of an appetite for doing that. And certainly based on what the Sustainability Committee has directed us to do and what my personal feelings are, and I don't know what other people, I'm interested obviously in what other people think, but my research and my work in landscaping has involved pesticides. I don't use them, I don't advocate for them, but it's impossible to avoid clients who want to use them. So what I'm hoping for is that we would elect to monitor only, but I want to make sure if we take the money that we are not also taking it's contingent upon the use of pesticides, because I do not want to be in a position where we're saying yes to money that has strings attached to deadly chemicals, to put it quite bluntly. I think that to be honest, people are becoming more enlightened about the dangers of these things. We do not abate without consequence to us and to the environment at large, as you pointed out, and as I have pointed out. So I just want to understand that, because I think that there are concerns, legitimate concerns, and I don't want to be hamstrung by anything that's written in this. It would say, yes, but you must do X. Because
I will let Drew inquire about that. But my conversations with Sue Raymore, who was the head of that board, and a couple more members, was that they were very conscious about not achieving what you're talking about, that is, being very parsimonious about using chemicals, to the point where last summer we had, during August, I believe, an event where people pushed it as much as they could before using chemicals to reduce the population of mosquitoes. Now, I live in a household where my wife has asthma, and she told me that, and she had never told me that, when that happens, she cannot breathe for the next 3 days.
Yeah.
Okay, so we should be very conscious about the use of chemicals for our our mosquito population.
Yeah.
Also know that half the birds in Europe disappeared. Okay,
It's true.
so
Yeah, and I would invite everyone to that point, to do the research on BTI, which is the substance that's used as a larvicide. And it's, once you do, you'll come to the conclusion that I've come to, because federal law prohibits it from being used anywhere where it's going to end up in drinking water, which would basically be Lake Michigan.
So, Drew, you can help us figure out whether this money is contingent upon using some sort of chemical. And if the answer to that is no, we certainly can make a strategic decision on how we're going to use that money later.
Yeah, my understanding, it's not, the means, method of the means are not defined, but the idea of monitoring breeding conditions is the first thing itemized in the letter. Larviciding of significant breeding areas is the second. Treating catch basins, sewers, and the like, and then adulticiding spraying, which I think was you were referring to, the airborne spraying, which is different than larviciding, but still uses chemicals, right? But it's just different chemicals. And
So do you need us to take an action today in order for
The
this?
the only request that tonight is, do you want to direct me to signal to the trustee in dissolution that the village wants these monies to have some abatement program? Again, how broad that program and the tools you want to use, but
So it sounds to me like the signal is, we want you to look at that and just confirm what trustee Brienne said, which is it's not contingent upon the use of any pesticides, which it sounds like it's not.
I can confirm that, and we can bring this back at the next meeting if you'd like.
I think that would be great.
Or accept the monies on the condition that it's,
Yes, that's what I would
Yes,
propose.
That's what I propose.
yeah.
So it's a consensus on accepting the money with the direction to look, at the next meeting, what would be the direction with that money?
I have a question. Like, if we're not using pesticides, what are we using?
It's a good question.
Well, yeah.
Like, the money is
yeah.
supposed to be for mosquito abatement, so if we can't use, you know.
Well, what if it's draining places that, the other water
Right, I
that
mean,
are
I'm
the breeding
asking, like,
ground?
what,
Right,
how would we facilitate that?
We would contact an expert.
If you saw the survey of other communities, most communities are doing monitoring, and most communities are doing larviciding. Not all communities do adulticide,
Adulticide.
right? That's the one where there's a lot of differentiation. And that's the spraying by truck or helicopter or plane, or drone even. But a lot of communities are doing larviciding because it's the most cost-efficient way to control mosquito populations, which all gets back to public health. In there, the packet was also that link to the CDC and why there is the issue surrounding mosquito control. So.
It strikes me that as long as the uses are broad, that we should go ahead and authorize you to take the money unless it dictates us to use pesticides. However, this is a larger discussion. It seemed like the discussion that took place at the Sustainability Committee was an interesting introduction into the many perspectives that our constituents may have, and we will need to look at it carefully, understand it far better than I do already, and make some careful decisions going forward that may be some form of trial and error, perhaps, to try to cut back in a way that makes sense for the community. It's not maybe one of the more significant decisions that we make as a body. But it seems to me, unless they're dictating the use of pesticides as a must, that we should go ahead and accept it and accept that we are going to need to look at this very carefully.
Yeah, it might be a nice committee of the whole topic at some point.
Saturday meeting.
Well, the other
An
thing-
expert would be great. I would love to hear from experts other than Kate.
Well, and we don't know what is coming in the next several years that might be a new way to treat, to do whatever that isn't necessarily a toxic chemical, and we will have those funds available to avail ourselves of those future things, so.
And the last piece of information I would share is the county responded back to my inquiry, because the letter talks about, if the village doesn't accept the funds, they'll go to the county health department. And my question to the county health department was, well, what would you do with those
What would you do
monies?
with
And their answer was they would take on monitoring in unincorporated areas.
Well,
So even
that's-
though this is Lake Bluff tax dollars
Yeah.
that funded it, their answer was they would take on monitoring, and that would be the extent of their activities, except maybe if there was some outbreak of some other issue, significant issue, where they would want to do more. But generally speaking, it was going to just be monitoring in unincorporated areas.
Well, certainly that's my backyard in the sanctuary, a mile of swampy,
IDOT owned property, yes.
where lots of mosquitoes are.
So,
But lots of bats and lots of other things. I agree with trustee Ryder. We're talking about an ecosystem. We're not just talking, these, to be quite frank, are annoyances, and that's about it. So we have to recognize that they serve a function. We don't like them, but they still serve a function. So I just want to say that I agree with you. This is actually a really big deal.
It doesn't
They
seem
also,
like it. but
they
it
also
is.
carry disease, so I think we have to be cognizant of that. So I agree with what you're saying, but they also carry disease, and that's something that we need to make sure we remember.
That's true, yeah. The likelihood of getting it is super low, but to your question, there's genetic work being done for as far as the mosquito species that carry Zika, looking at genetically altering them so that they can't reproduce. So there is a lot of work that's going on, but those mosquitoes really don't exist up here. They're a warmer climate mosquito, so.
We're getting warmer.
So,
I know we're gonna change our landscaping zone soon, just FYI.
so before we become Florida, so I hear from a consensus that we do accept the money. Number two, that we will be conscious about what kind of, how we spend that money and what kind of consequence do we have on the environment, the way, and we do monitoring and we do treatment as well. But we're very conscious about the effect we'll have on our environment. And I believe this is consistent with the previous board, with Sue being at the head of that board, where they really were conscious about what they were trying to achieve for us and so
Where they still did monitoring and they did larvicide. They were just really backing off the adulticiding. That's what they were really stepping back from.
Okay, so we will continue on that and we'll be conscious about this action on our village.
But I'll follow up with Mr. Mancini and let him know that the village will accept the monies unless the mandate requires use of pesticides.
Yes. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you all.
Next is item number 8, our village attorney's report. Mr. Friedman?
No report tonight.
Thank you. Next is my report. I do not have a report as well. Followed by our consent agenda. That would be item 10, 11, and 12.
Drew, I'm sorry, when we were at the point of setting the order of the meeting, I didn't know if that was the right time to ask I had some questions about item 11. So I know it's on the consent agenda, so if I missed my opportunity, I'm sorry.
No, there will be a point to ask for
Okay.
that.
Okay.
I'll make sure about that.
Thanks.
So the consent agenda, of course, includes item number 10, acceptance of a correspondence. Please note all correspondence was delivered to the Village Board of Trustees in the informational report on February something. I do not have the rest of that. Item number 11, that is a second reading of an ordinance amending the special use permits for the Center Avenue Partners Development on 28 to 30 East Center Avenue for Half and Half Pizza. And item number 12, that is second reading of an ordinance amending Title 3 of the Village of Lake Bluff Municipal Code concerning Class X, S, and AC liquor license. First, is there a request to remove any of these items from the consent agenda?
Yes. Item 11.
Okay.
So it's removed.
It is removed.
Yep.
Now, any more requests?
No.
Next is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on item 10 and 12?
Roll call.
So, clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Markey?
Aye.
Trustee Rappin?
Aye.
Trustee Ryder?
Aye.
Trustee Ingemann?
Aye.
Trustee Rand?
Aye.
Thank you. I will follow with item 11 as a single item.
Right. You give a
Okay.
motion.
Next is item 11, an ordinance amending the special use permits for the Center Avenue Partners Development on 28 to 30 East Center Avenue, Half and Half Pizza. Is there a motion to approve the ordinance?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. On January 7, 2022, the Village of Lake Bluff received a zoning relief application from Half and Half Pizza LLC, the applicant, seeking amendments to the special use permit governing the restaurant uses at 28 to 30 or 38 East Center Avenue and 53 to 91 East Scranton Avenue, being the Center Avenue Partners Development. The petitioner no longer intends to establish a basement dining space cache as authorized by the current special use permit, but instead proposes to establish a primarily carry-out and delivery restaurant, half and half pizza. Orders would be prepared in the basement and fulfilled in bulk, a separate restaurant use on the property. Allowing the expansion would take the form of an amendment to Ordinance 2020-13, which governs the various special uses and variations on the property, including the former cache space. At the conclusion of its public hearing on February 16 to consider the application, the PCCBA unanimously recommended the village board approve the requested relief with the condition that the hours of operation be limited such that the restaurant can only operate between the hours of 6 a.m. and 11 p.m., identical to Bank. The other conditions applicable to Innovasi and Bank today, such as requirements that employees park in the train station parking lot, would also apply, as would provisions that allow hours of operation and floor plans to change by a resolution of a village board. That would mean without a public hearing. The ordinance additionally modifies one of its mechanisms. This expands the scope of the mechanisms to allow more possible cases where the area devoted to restaurant uses may be reconfigured by resolution as described further in the attached ordinance and the PCCBA staff memorandum. Last, the village board approved first reading of the ordinance at its February 28th, 2022 meeting. At that time, the applicant requested and the board did not grant waiver of second reading. Comments from the board?
I was wondering if we had any input from the public between that first reading and today.
None.
Thank you.
Well, the reason I asked this is because I was not at the February 28th meeting, but I did have some comments that I shared with Drew about fire suppression. And upon further researching and my questions are, I realize this is currently a kitchen, but my question was about the pizza oven. I don't know if everybody's aware of what this is my question for Mr. DeRosier is, is the pizza oven or both of them that you're gonna be using 700 to 800 degree ovens, like most commercial pizza ovens? And if so, how is that space going to be ventilated to make sure that the temperature in the space for the people working there does not become oppressive?
With the application that we have filed with the village, it outlines the application for a permit for the modification of the space. It actually outlines that we have a hood in place and exhaust and both fresh air, makeup air into the space to remove heat and fumes from those two ovens. In addition, the ovens run at about 650 degrees. They're not the ones that go up to 800.
Okay.
And the efficiency of the ovens, one of the things about really good quality ovens is that they retain heat internally and don't actually heat the space around them very much. It makes them, you're able to actually produce more pizzas faster by not losing heat to the room. So the ovens that we buy are very well insulated. In addition, all of the exhausting heat and ducting is insulated as well. And then finally, I'm sorry.
John, could
Yeah.
you please introduce yourself before continuing?
Apologies. My name is John DeRosier. I'm the owner of Half and Half Pizza
Thank you.
and the applicant. In addition, the basement space was built and still has existing HVAC runs that do hook up to the restaurant's air conditioning units now. So if the space is too warm, then we will add additional air conditioning into the space if it's needed and required. And as a small side note, we actually spend a lot of effort and time in all of our restaurants in the way that we take care of our employees. Most of our kitchens run at 75 to 80 degrees at their hottest in the warmest parts of the year. At Innovasi, for example, we have a 12-ton air conditioning unit that only services the kitchen, while we have another 12-ton unit that services all of the entire rest of the dining room space and the bathrooms. Most restaurants, especially in my 27-year career, don't have anything that's this devoted to the quality and comfort of the employees that work for it. So our staff is something that we take really seriously. We take care of our people really well. We pay them very well, and we definitely don't have environments for them that are not safe and as comfortable as humanly possible to make for them to work in. And we wouldn't do something like that in this case either.
Right. Well, it's good to know, because as I'm aware, and I know you are too, commercial kitchens are romanticized a lot on TV, but they can be incredibly taxing to work in. And so considering the small space that you have, I'm glad to know that, because during the summer, working in a kitchen is about as hard as a job as there is. The other thing, though, that John can't change with HVAC is I just have an issue with the parking, and I guess this leads to, and I know that I've watched meetings where Mr. DeRosier has made comments about there's just not that much parking, and I'm sure that he still agrees with that. And I wonder how we're not going to have a parking issue with people coming and going as we continue to increase the number of restaurants in town. So I hope that at some point we're going to address the tent on Block 1 so that we can return. Because, Mr. DeRosier, isn't it true you want to get this up and running by April, I think you said?
I would like to. However, the ability of materials and things like that might push us into May. So we'll see how it goes. But
Yeah.
right now, we're running at as fast as pace as we can. As far as the parking goes, though, the old plan that we had would have had 30 or so customers in the space as a speakeasy for a number of hours on end, whereas the new space has people coming and going to pick up pizzas, which are short parking times, coming and leaving. There's no seating inside the space as it's designed right now. So if anything, what we've done by changing this is alleviated the parking issues that the other place possibly could have created before. Although at night, usually after 5:30 or 6 o'clock at night, there are plenty of spaces for customers to park in. Although they may not find a space literally in front of the door they want to walk into, the parking at night certainly is better than the parking during the daytime.
True, but they could end up just hanging out, grabbing a beer and waiting. So I think what I'm getting at is not so much your business as much as just the idea of we're creating this destination, which is a goal, but we still have parking problems, and I think,
Kate, Trustee Bryant, the mention of parking in that text is actually for employees of Mr. DeRosier. We have a requirement for them to park at the...
Oh, yeah. Right at the train station.
So it's actually a different requirement that forces employees to park at the train station instead of parking on Oak, for example, or on Scranton, okay? That is a distinction.
Yes, I just think that if I wasn't talking about employees, I was talking about customers.
It does, but the text was specifically requiring, I need to be specific about that. The requirement was for employees, so we fit the same requirements than other ordinances we have passed in the past. Okay?
Okay.
I also wanted to mention that the Business Advisory Committee, this is clearly a topic that has risen to the top with our group, parking and how we're going to manage parking in the central business district. So it's something that we're working on and talking about, and at some point we'll have, hopefully in the near future, we'll have a document, a presentation for the board. But we've been discussing it with local business owners and getting their input because they have great opinions and great information that they can share with us on how we might be able to make parking a little easier and facilitate it a little bit better downtown.
It would seem like incorporating some spaces near there that would be the much shorter window would help to have those spots just turn over quickly. And I don't know if that's going to be incorporated, but
So in the tentative budget includes money to update the village's parking study, and we could look at that, the idea of adding 15-minute, 30-minute, stalls in there, like we have in front of other business we've done from time to time for that specific reason. The occupants or users are more oriented towards, in and out, and so if we can help facilitate that and open up more parking opportunities, and maybe that's gonna be looked at.
right.
Is that a will of the board where we would basically direct a study for parking spaces? Kate?
I think we've had that done. I've always advocated for Block 3. The parking is there. We need to do it. We are trying to create a destination. But no, I don't think so because we've already spent that money. We have a recent parking study from 2014. And we have 11 spaces that are currently blocked for no reason. So I think really what I'd like to do is address that issue and get that thing taken down, and we'd free up 11 spaces so that people could park, because they drive up here. They just do. I think my last question was, I'm a little, about this particular business is, in the summer, there are tables outside where people can eat, but in the winter, it's just grab and go. Is there any potential to change change the configuration of Bonk to make it actually a pizza and everything else kind of place?
There is actually, we have plans for, not plans, that's not the right word to use. We do have drawings that lay out seating inside of Bonk, but there are a couple of different issues that have to be addressed with the state municipal code for plumbing and the requirements for certain numbers of bathrooms per number of seats that are present in any business. We've actually have an architect working on a proposal for the city that we'll have in the next month or two here, where possibly that is something we can possibly do in the wintertime. But this business specifically is mostly designed for carry out and delivery. Its main intention is not to be a sit-down restaurant. Whether that's something that we could investigate adding later, there's going to have to be a couple of things we have to go through. Another one is going to be another zoning board meeting, which would be the third one for this particular space, if we want to change it and add seats into it. That'll be coming up in the Business Advisory Committee report for sure. Even if we wanted to add seats, we have to go through a whole nother round of the kind of things we're going through right now, in addition to the state plumbing code law that we have to work on. But right now, that's not the plan. The business is designed to be a carry-out and delivery business mainly.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Kate. Any more questions to the board about this item? So if there are no more questions.
Can I, just for a point of clarification, and Peter, do you have the ordinance handy? So just to clarify, what Mr. DeRossi was describing as a future possible scenario where he would ask to have tables inside seasonally. Right now, this draft ordinance that's in front of you for second reading would consider a future alteration of dining spaces. There's certain things that are permitted as of right and some are not. And I say as of right pursuant to this approval. But as he was describing, Peter, like say switching a certain percentage, I don't know how big of a floor area you were considering, John.
It really depends on exactly what the ordinance says we're allowed to do or not to do. I think right now is there anything that says that we're allowed to have any seats at all if we solve the plumbing and bathroom issue?
Well, I don't want to.
Or does it give us a percentage of total floor space?
No, it does not.
Okay, so yeah, so we'd have to come back and ask for that specifically, correct?
I just wanted to
And
make
the
that.
ordinance does not get into those numbers, if that was the question. I'm just making, right on
Okay.
page,
Well,
section 5, B2, small I.
It talks about the dining area.
Alteration of restaurant dining spaces. Is that what, Drew,
That's
is that what you
highlighted.
were referring to?
yeah, I just wanted to make clear because I'm going back and thinking about what Bonk, and Glenn, help me out here. When Bonk was approved, was there dining and indoor dining as part of that, or has it always been only seasonal out?
Tom?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. So there's, it's not in this particular ordinance before you, but back when we did the zoning work that allowed bonk to come in, there was a provision that would allow up to 22 seats at bonk, provided that they could meet what they have to do under the Illinois Plumbing Code. So again, that's not before you tonight, but that is part of the approvals that are still underlying for property.
I guess the answer, Drew, is that we'd have 22 seats.
Well, and I guess the questioning the clarity, if that's what's desired for the ability for them to come back in, that this ordinance had a specific set of situations where Center Avenue Partners had some flexibility in how to use that space, right? The idea of what was dedicated dining space. So I guess I wanted to make that clear. If the intentions are for Mr. Rossi to come back and use those other triggers, I want everybody to be clear about what that meant. And I guess, Glenn, I would ask back, was that the zoning board's understanding when they considered this, that it was inclusive of the existing approvals or previous or prior approvals for bonk that included the indoor dining, or were they viewing it as it's currently being used without any indoor dining?
Yeah, hard to say if every member of the zoning board knew every detail, right? Certainly we presented it as, here was this original package, which, included bonk, and we presented the ordinance that showed there could be seating in bonk. There really wasn't a whole lot of discussion about that topic either way. It was really, the discussion was about the change from cachet to, from being a sit-down speakeasy bar with some food to being being used to support takeout pizza. So seating didn't really come into that.
I have a question. This is contingent upon using bonk to serve people the pizza. And so is what we're discussing that this ordinance includes language that would allow for bonk to have seats at a future date without return to come and ask for us? Because there's the parking issue I'm talking about.
Yeah, but Drew, didn't you say that was previously approved?
It's already been approved. That was
Okay.
approved, but I guess my point was I just wanted to clarify that prior approval, if it considered indoor dining, that the zoning board knew that, was cognizant of that when they made this recommendation, just make sure that was crystal clear. And that, secondly, if that was that you all sitting around this table were aware of that existing approval, that this gives the owners of Center Avenue Partners flexibility with future dining areas, and I want to make that crystal clear. And that could be no big deal, or that just want to make that crystal clear.
This is really regarding the basement. And they're making the use less impactful on Lake Bluff by having pizza ovens instead of a speakeasy. And then there's an existing ordinance that allows for bonk to have seating. Do we want to use this to reconsider that by denying this, or do we just want to address the basement, which is primarily what this is about, the use of the basement?
Well, then wouldn't we?
There are different entities also as a side note. The basement is a new entity that's applying for the use of the space. Bonk has its own special use permit along with because it's part of the bike shop, which is owned by Rev Cycles. So there are two different entities that we're talking about right now. And internally, we have an agreement with the other entity that we will use the space for people to pick up pizzas at night. But one entity applied for the use of the basement space, and that entity is not the bicycle shop. So there's some sort of difference in there.
I just also would clarify too, if I could. So if seating was to come back was to be introduced at bonk in the future, that still requires a resolution by the village board. It's just the zoning hearing, the legal notice, the different findings of fact about traffic and parking and things like that. Many of those procedural steps have been satisfied already. So you really just have one step, which is Mr. Duracier submits a plan, it comes to the board, it's approved by resolution. That can happen much more quickly and efficiently than a full zoning process, which at best is about a 45-day exercise.
We still have to go through that process. So this particular motion now does not allow us to automatically just put in 20 seats at Bonk.
If I understand
Correct?
correctly. If I
As
understand,
my understanding, it does not. So,
if I understand correctly, we are only discussing the basement with a pizza
Right.
oven and with the upstairs for delivery. And it does not regards putting seats or putting 22 chairs upstairs, correct?
It gives the
Got it.
option, it gives
That's
the
what I thought.
option, though, doesn't it?
Resolution by approval of village board.
So it's a different process. So this sets out, and it's really in section 3B, 2, Romanet 2. So that process which Glenn was talking about. So you would still have a set of eyeballs looking at that by resolution, but it's not the traditional pathway which these have come in the past. I think the intention of that is to be allow some flexibility for the business to know that there could be operational changes or the, continuously evolving marketplace as it comes to restaurateurs and how they have to manage in a post-COVID universe. But also that this has, I think historically the village has had, I would call it a tight grip on special uses in the community. And this is kind of a little bit, it's a half a step back from that, but there's still an approval process. But again, it's different than what the village has done. So I just want to make that crystal clear. And that's
But
why.
also, by doing it by resolution of the village board, it provides the most discretion for the village board, as opposed to going through and having the standards that are present for a amendment to the special use or what have you. By having it be the village board, it's solely within your discretion as to whether to grant it and what conditions to apply.
So the bottom line is the PCZBA and/or the village board has one final look before we approve putting 22 seats in this space.
Any reconfiguration.
Yeah.
And just as a point of reference, the cachet number of seats was to be how many? I know that
it was
was
around 30, I believe.
30?
I believe
33.
so. 33, yeah.
Okay. Just as a point of reference, I wanted to see
Yeah.
what we've gained, what we've,
The net.
right.
Yeah. And two, I mean, this again goes into, I would file this under conversations that the Business Advisory Committee is having presently is how should the village try to manage a regulatory environment and at the same time be more business friendly?
Right.
Yeah, and I'll just say that, ultimately, I hope we can resolve the parking issue because I think it is to the benefit of our community to have a vibrant downtown and for John DeRosier to have another restaurant that has seating in it. That's what we want. We just don't want to, we would like parking along with it.
Right.
We have it.
So from a discussion standpoint, we're not limited to approve this ordinance still. We can still move forward with that. We just need an appropriate action for the seating part at Bonk, for example. Okay?
So if John DeRossi wants to do that, he'll have to come to you and ask in the form of resolution, the board would consider that request after this is adopted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So nothing prevents us from going forward with this document in front of us right now.
And
I agree with that.
And right now, it's just a carry-out, pickup kind of situation.
Correct. Any more questions on the board before a roll call on this one? We got all questions answered, correct? We're good. All right. So clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Rappin.
Aye.
Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Trustee Inkeman.
Aye.
Trustee Brienne.
Aye.
Trustee Markey.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Thank you, my pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
Moving on to item 13, a public hearing concerning the Village of Lake Bluff proposed fiscal year 2023 and 2024 biennial budget. As required by law, the village must hold a public hearing for the fiscal year 2023-2024 tentative biennial budget, the budget, after which the fiscal plan may be revised and passed without any further inspection, notice, or hearing. Consistent with past practice, first reading of a budget ordinance will follow this public hearing, with second reading and adoption of a budget anticipated at the next village board meeting on March 28th. Notice of this hearing was published in the Lake County News Sun on March 3rd, 2022. The finance director will present a summary report of a budget and be available to respond to questions at the hearing. It is recommended that this public hearing be continued until the March 28th village board meeting. Bettina, would you mind giving us a summary report?
Sure. Good evening. This public hearing is for the village's biannual budget for the fiscal period beginning May 1, 22, ending April 30th, 2024. The 2023 strategic plan includes an expression of the Village of Lake Bluff's mission, and these fundamentals are directly correlated to the planning and commitment of resources for which the budget is the building block. The village's organizational goals are also the basis for the budget, focusing on fiscal responsibility and sense of community through quality service delivery, economic development by infrastructure investing, stability within planning and long-range reviewing, environmental sensitivity, utilizing program management, and public assets, continuing infrastructure maintenance. The Village of Lake Bluff has used a biennial budget process continuously since FY 2017, and is one of the few small number of Illinois municipalities to use this method. The approach to budgeting strengthens the village's long-range planning and promotes effective program management. While statute requires that the budget continue to be adopted annually, the first year's budget and financial plan forms the basis for the second year plan with minor modifications. Unexpended operating budgets from the first year may be carried over to the second year with approval of the village board. And the resulting plan document includes and authorizes 2 years of operating budgets, the 2-year capital improvement or CIP plan, and identifies financial trends and information for future years to support the village's financial plan. Budgets organized by funds, which allow for the allocation of resources, and not all activities or local governments have the same financial objectives. Various funds in the budget account for activities with different objectives. General fund is department expenses and some projects, and special revenues include fire tax, IMRF, Social Security, motor fuel, and 911. Capital includes special project fund. The debt is to account for bond debt, in the water for business enterprise funds for water infrastructure and services relating to providing water to the community. And also the police pension fund, which is a trust to separately account for police pension revenues and expenses. And the library, which is a component unit to the village and included in the village budget and levy. The operating budget, all costs excluding capital and contingency for the village and the library, is $12.87 million for fiscal year 23, representing a 4.16% increase when compared to fiscal year 22. This is largely as a result of increased contract and commodities expenses, and the FY24 operating costs are relatively consistent with less than a 1% increase. Some contributing factors related to the operating budget include, personnel services, which are union staff salary increases, fire department personnel costs, medical insurance, which is budgeted to increase by 6%, and dental insurance, which was due to change, actually declined 2.8%. Contracts and commodities also include dispatching costs, ambulance service contracts. The new contract is a 5-year term through 2025, and we've estimated about a 30% increase, which is based on the new IGA, which is focused more on charges for time and materials, with tiered rates based on the type of service provided. There's also public safety building improvements that are included in this part of the budget related to improvements for lockers, painting, lot reconfiguration for fiscal year 23 23 for $164,000, and in fiscal year 24, $490,000 related to the building's roof and masonry and attic repairs. Pension costs are also part of an item to highlight. Police pension expenditures reflect an annual 3% COLA to benefit annuitants, in addition to the costs of estimated contributions for the pension fund. And the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund is mandatory for all full-time employees. The village is required to contribute at a rate of 9.87% for calendar year 21 and reduced to 7% for calendar year 2022. Historically, village revenue sources are generally stable except for grant revenue. Overall anticipated revenues are consistent with those realized in FY20 prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. The total overall reduction in fund balance can be attributed to capital project expenses, including water infrastructure improvements. The village continues to balance available resources with the cost of providing appropriate services. And this chart represents a historical look back at the swings in revenue during economic downturns. The revenue changes, or the review of projected revenue changes, are summarized on this chart. Like many communities across the United States, Lake Bluff is attempting to balance the high service delivery expectations of its residents with the unpredictability of the economy. And this new normal economy requires continued vigilance. Some of the highlights related to the changes in the projections: property tax revenue reflects a slight increase following CPI of 1.796%. Sales tax revenue projections were conservatively estimated to return to pre-COVID levels from FY20, but consumer chain supply issues may slow the growth and contribution based on consumption. State shared income tax receipts have benefited from improving labor markets and are higher than estimated as far as receipts and payments, but we've projected to be at $132 per capita. The village projections remain conservative at about a 5% increase, and state income tax receipts account for approximately 4.5% of all revenues to the village. Utility tax revenues are expected to remain flat, except with telecommunications taxes, which are predicted to continue a downward decline as seen in previous years. And water revenues will fluctuate with usage. The rates will remain flat in fiscal year 23. Sewer revenues are flat and reflect no change in the $1.10 per 1,000 gallon rate. So this is a view of the breakout of revenues as a percent of the whole, with property tax and sales tax sharing the largest portion. From a financial perspective, the village's economic outlook remains strong, yet cautious in the face of current challenges. The fiscal year 23 and 24 budget is optimistic, but cognizant and sensitive to the challenges of the past 2 years. History reveals the stability of property tax revenues, the sales and home rule tax budgeted declines from fiscal year 21 and 22, and the anticipated stabilization of sales tax revenue are shown in this chart. So you can see the 2020 budgeted numbers that went down and the increases for the following years based on historical data. From a tax bill perspective, the village strives to balance taxes, user fees, and other revenue sources to ensure financial security, and the village represents 9% of the total tax bill. The village did utilize CPI for 2021 tax extension along with EAV decreases. So the distribution of the 21 property taxes will be collected in budget year 2023. The slide displays general fund balances for fiscal year 15 through 21 with projections for 22 through 24. In addition to the department expense changes, general fund balances have been affected by the transfers to the vehicle replacement fund, the capital fund, and also capital projects that are resuming. This chart does not include the library and represents all village funds excluding interfund transfers. The operating budget includes personnel costs, contracts, commodities, debt payments, and pension costs. So just comparing the overall budget to those portions of the expenses related to operating. The library's long-range plan is under development to chart a course through the significant ongoing change experienced by today's public libraries. Now, the roof of both the main library and the annex were replaced, and these one-time additional capital costs used reserves. So the library has been transferring about $20,000 each year back into reserves. Minor repairs are ongoing, and staff and the Board of Trustees for the library remain committed to providing safe and accessible and welcoming facilities. That's not good. Well, there's an overlay there. FY24 sees some changes with capital expenses increasing to 23%, whereas in FY23 we were at 31% for contracts and commodities and 16% for capital, which is this gray area that I've lost my fonts to. Debt services at 2%. Contingency was the next item, and at 2%, and pension was at 11% in this area, with personnel services at 38%. Overall, the fiscal year 23 and 24's expenses are aligned with most significant increases related to capital plans. So what are those capital expenditures? The total expenditure budget for 23 is $2.3 million. And for FY24, $3.84 million, which represents 24%, as I said in the prior slide, of the total budget. Chart illustrates some changes in budgeted capital expenditures from 2015 to 2024. This is the listing that was provided in the prior Finance Committee meeting with regards to the capital improvements that were reviewed, parsed down to the items that we will be moving forward with in fiscal year 23 and 24. The next slide shows the map of where those projects are, where they are as far as relative to the village. Storm sewer being pink, which items number 32 and 35. 35 is related to the trunk study. 32 is culvert repair work. Street resurfacing is the orange or yellowish color, which I have a list of on the next slide, the specific streets that are being repaved. Basically, that's what that is, and some walkway surfaces. And then water main repair that's being done out here relative to 176. So specifically, that listing is, as I said, birch covered improvements, storm sewer trunk, the list of streets that are going through resurfacing, and then the pump station relocate water main that was out further out west in town. And that's it. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you. Questions on the board?
I mean, the only question that I would ask is the resident who was talking about the trees and $22,000. I can't remember if we had talked about wanting to plant 500 trees or not, but Drew, is it Jeff or somebody else that can tell us a little bit about what our tree plan is for the year?
Yeah, so we got to 100 this year, and that was, as Mickey commented on, using those possibility place trees. They're smaller in diameter, DBH, and really easy to handle, as she said. And so we put 75 of those in. We planted what we call, 25 of our traditional larger caliper trees that we put in the ground. We are also waiting to get bids back on the planting along Sheridan Road as part of the bridge landscaping work of the McClory Bridge replacement project. And this upcoming budget did include that. I think that's there's that 22 plus there's like another 25, right, Bettina, in admin for trees. So there's more than that in addition. So and we're going to continue to try to do a combined approach of using those possibility place trees, which are very easy to put in the ground, but also the larger DBH trees throughout town. And good news, bad news is, yes, we can put a lot of those smaller trees in easily and quickly. The bad news is I did get phone calls from time to time. It's like, This is a joke. This is like a Charlie Brown Christmas tree, right?
Right.
So I got those comments, but residents come around when you explain to them that, they do, they'll take off and that they're, natives and generally people come around. So, so we're going to keep doing that and try to reach that number of 500 as quickly as we can. So, additionally, this budget does include other activities, which is outsourcing tree maintenance and getting it on a more regimented schedule. We've had a practice of going out and doing it and doing risk management removals related to areas of frequently populated areas for special events. But and beyond that, we've been trying to do every 6 years or so, 6 to 7 years, go out and do grid work and hit every public tree. And some years were better than not, but we want to get very consistent with that and do it on a much regular basis. And so that's part of this plan. And I think tree removal is always going to be part of the village's program, right? Because we're going to have trees that get damaged or destroyed by weather or just, this is their turn to, pass, so to speak. But I think we've been trying to, have removal to be a smaller part of the budget, right? Have increased activities with planting and maintaining those that we do have. So the short answer is there's more in there than the 22. It's more than twice that. And plus the other improvements related to general landscaping following other capital projects. So there's significantly more dollars dedicated to tree planting. Did I miss anything, Jake?
No, actually summed it up. I didn't even get a chance to speak there. You got me.
So a question, significantly more than 22,000, but also significantly more than past years? Is that if we get to 47,000, which I think is roughly what you've quoted now, 25 and 22, is that more than what we've spent in past years? So it's showing it as an increase?
Yes.
And when you say that we planted 100 trees, what's the net increase? How many do we lose in that same period?
Jake, was it closer? Was it like net 40?
I say net 40
Yeah.
is that's safe. We're never gonna really get. It's gonna be tough to get to that net 500. We're gonna lose trees every year, like Drew said. There's gonna be storms. There's gonna be some just like this winter. We had some storms with some uprooting that trees that look normally healthy. We lost right on Oak Avenue there up by Blodgett. So, I mean, the goal is to work as hard as we can to get as many plants. Yeah.
So the village had a period of time when we were planting a lot of ash trees because they were very inexpensive and plentiful, and so that didn't work out so well. But at the same time, I think the village has tried to be smart about where we put trees and trying to plant that 100-year forest, not, this immediate, let's have a tree every 5 feet, right? We don't want to do that because those trees will struggle and they'll fight for sunlight. And so there's been that ongoing battle too. And Jake, when he used to be a member of the crew, literally, with a shovel in hand planting those trees, has told me, correct me if I'm wrong, Jake, about that we overplanted. We put trees in that have struggled, that you go and look and they're like, they're one-sided or they've never reached full maturity because they were fighting for sunlight. And there's trees that are out. I mean, I'm sure you can point to several of those. Yes, Jake?
Yeah, it's one of our, our toughest challenges right now too, is that we are still trying to correct where we planted so many trees, one on top of the other, and then we'd lose one. And then one of the trees looked awful. And then we would get the call, say, there's got to be something wrong with this tree. And, it's very spindly. There's not much life to it. And part of it, we try and explain that it's going to take it some time because it tried to grow in the shade or right next to a tree, and it was crowded its whole time. Now it's finally getting a chance to breathe, so to speak, to open up a little bit, and it takes time. And just when we plant them on top of each other, one after one, right next to the other, I'm worried that by trying to get too many trees in the ground too quickly, we're going to end up with the same result.
So let me understand that. So is it a matter of budget? Is it a matter of time, or is it a matter of we don't have enough space to put 500 trees?
I think we have enough space to find, we can find places for 5, but after that, it gets, we'll just have to be careful where we do it. And part of it is we're creating new places to do that, like, the idea that the village owned 10 acres just east of Jawa. So we've been working, we've had conversations with Ebola about clearing that area as another place to plant more trees. So we'll create new spaces. The 176 corridor, again, is another place where we're taking out non-natives, the invasives, and we'll create new places, but it's just something to be cognizant of, that it's not, it's somebody, there's not like you can put a tree anywhere and everywhere, right? You just have to be thoughtful about it, because you don't want to waste the resources.
So one thing I don't understand is, where is that number of 500 going through as a target?
I think that we pointed to what we lost with Emerald Ash Borer, the EAB.
And so from a planning and strategic thought process, so we need to regain, so do we really need to go back to backfill was 500? And to Jake's point, it's gonna take time for these trees to basically feel at home and grow and be healthy. How fast should we backfill was 500? And I mean, we don't have to backfill it. It needs to be harmonious to the community. It needs to be, again, happy to live in this community. So what is our goal here?
Well, just real quick, doing the math, right? If we lost 500 and we're gaining net 40 every year, it's going to take us 12 years to get back there. So then the question is, all right, if somebody said, all right, there's an extra $100,000 available, do we have the resources and the professional opinion of the staff that we ought to be planting those trees that quickly? I think that's what we're trying to figure out is.
There's more to that. We have lost 500. That doesn't mean that in the next 12 years, we're going to lose more. So we don't need to do 40. We need to do probably more than 40 a year to actually arrive in 12 years to a net zero.
I was saying if we do 100 a year, which I think is the plan, the net is 40, because you still lose some throughout the year, right? That's the idea.
Yep.
Correct.
It's a lot of loss.
So, and
And that can be ameliorated by maintenance. I think we're.
some.
Oh, definitely.
But like I comment about the ash trees, but there were a lot of volunteer ash trees, right? Those grew anywhere and everywhere they're given opportunities. So a lot of those trees that we lost, and I'm thinking like East Blodgett, we probably had 40 trees alone on East Blodgett Parkway on the north side.
75 on that concept.
But there were 75 there.
Yeah.
And how many of those did we plant, Jake?
On Blodgett, 0. Those are all volunteer.
So it was an empty parkway filled with ash, and then so that it's,
I've taken out 17
yeah, yeah.
on my property.
On your property?
We've taken down 30 trees, yeah. You used to
All
not be
ash?
able to see the house. No, no. But I would say maintenance goes a long way toward it. So while I'm always a proponent of planting, we have to understand that by maintaining trees, we are preventing disease specifically from taking hold and pests. So maintenance is, I think, the greater challenge because it is incredibly time consuming. None of the guys are climbers, so they can't get up into these canopies that are 60, 70, 80 feet and don't have a bucket. So to me, the money is also going to be not better spent, but as well spent by engaging one or more companies that can do the maintenance. That is just too much for PW. It's just too much to expect for them to do it. So I think that we need to focus on that as well because we have a lot of heritage trees that I'm worried about. So I think Jake would probably agree that he'd love to have some relief where that's concerned. I'd like to see more spent there.
So let's make that very concrete to this
It's in there.
board.
It's in there.
But to Kate's point, we have budgeted 50 grand or somewhere there, 47,000, what I've heard. Should we budget more to actually respond to the need of planting and maintenance and putting a real budget for not our public work, but somebody else to help us with achieving that? That's
It's
the
in there.
question. But how much?
In there. So, yeah, maintenance, 60, I think I put in 60,000 to cover removal and trimming.
Yeah, maintenance went up 35,000 to 60,000 for each year.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's a separate line item from the 47. Okay.
Yeah, it's separate from the
That's
purchase.
fair.
It's in
Yeah, that's good.
forestry in the maintenance line.
So our line, or basically you're saying that 47 plus another 35, that is about $100,000.
More. Well, it sounds like there's an extra $50,000 to $60,000 this year for tree planting and maintenance.
Okay, so we're about, so is this enough?
Well, we can gauge it, right? We can do it, you can, yeah. I mean, I think that the tree maintenance is, hey, remind me of the cycle for that, Jake. 3, 5? What's the?
Well, we used to run it on a 7-year cycle. I mean, typically between 5 and 7 years, those cycle prunes.
No, I'm talking about what we're planning to outsource, the frequency, we looked at increasing that, right? Anyway, I think it's 3 to 5 year cycle. Yeah, so
want it to be 3.
there's money for that. So the maintenance is completely outsourced and will be done in a more frequent basis. Planting is more than doubled. And then we kept, I think we increased the removal just because of what we've been experiencing to match with trend.
So with regard to the maintenance, are we talking about creating a formal agreement with a tree
Yes.
maintenance company?
Yep.
And putting out an RFP?
Yep.
Okay, that's what I was hoping for, because otherwise I think it's too scattershot. Okay, good. And then then that budget line item would then come before us again, because they may, and that's not where cheapest is best, by the way, at all. So I would say that I was hoping you'd say the yes to that, because that's definitely.
That's what we've been planning.
So we may be anticipating seeing an increase of that. I think it would be warranted. I mean, this is.
Well, we'll see what the market bears, right?
Right.
We had, Jake had conversations early on about could we piggyback on, I think it was Highland Park had outsourced this. And like we've done other cases where we've done intergovernmental agreements and consortium approaches to these types of issues. And so we'll look at that, but we'll try to find the most economical way to to achieve the goal.
Thank you. And also I'd like to thank you because we had a previous conversation about trees and I think we were at 25 or 50 and we had a stretch to 75 and now we're at 100. So thank you very much.
Well, hopefully it's more. I mean, I think we've talked about doing 100 a year planting and then try to actually set that goal, but actually end up with a net positive more, just keep chipping away. And again, it's weather dependent. Like we've had some really bad storms where we've lost a lot of trees, but I think next year we can make a splash, so.
Thank you.
And I think, Christine, yeah.
I just wanted to say, I did notice and appreciate the responsiveness to the comments that people had been putting forth regarding trees. I wanted to thank the staff for being able to answer these questions on the fly. I also wanted to thank Bettina for her well-organized, despite one slide being a little goofy, presentation of, a lot of very complicated information, a lot of historical context, and I think it's going to do well for us in this next budget cycle because it's been so well put together. So thank you.
And I'll just add to that, it may occur to the public that of this whole budget, we talked about trees. But of course, we've spent a lot of time under Chair Ankerman from the Finance Committee on this budget. So I wanted to thank you as well for all your leadership.
Thank you. So concluding item 13, this is a public hearing and it is open and it will continue to be open for the next 2 weeks. Item 14 next is an ordinance adopting the biennial budget for the Village of Lake Bluff for the fiscal years commencing May 1st, 2022 and ending April 30, 2024. Is there a motion to approve this ordinance?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Thank you. The tentative biennial budget for the next 2 years includes $15,657,009 plus $2,555,000 in inter-fund transfers for fiscal year 2023 and $17,326,712 plus $2,147,000 in inter-fund transfers for fiscal year 2024. These sums include the Village of Lake Bluff funds and the Lake Bluff Public Library funds. The village utilizes a multi-year budget process as it emphasizes long-range planning, budgeting for results, effective program management, and fiscal responsibility. Specifically, the primary objectives of these budgets are to, 1, maintain current fund balances at or above village minimum reserve levels, 2, control operational costs, 3, continue reinvestment in village infrastructure, and 4, continue to deliver quality and efficient services. Additionally, this budget has been assembled with the intention to allocate resources consistent with the 2023 Village Strategic Plan. The operating budget, all costs except capital and contingency for the village and the library, is 12.87 million for fiscal year 2023, representing a 4.16% increase when compared to fiscal year 2022. This increase is largely attributed to increased contract and communities expenses. The fiscal year 2024 operating costs are relatively consistent with a less than 1% increase, as one-time contract cost reductions offset the personal service increase for the year. Property taxes and sales taxes continue to be the two largest sources of revenue at 4.55 million and 3.2 million respectively in fiscal year 2023. Sales tax revenues projections are conservatively estimated to return to the fiscal year 2020 pre-COVID levels, as consumer supply chain issues may slow the growth contribution based on consumption. Prior budget modifications reduced revenue expectations and deferred certain capital investments, namely contributions to the Vehicle Equipment Replacement Fund and Capital Fund. The fiscal year 23 and 24 biennial budget fully reinstates contribution of $380,000 to the ERF and $1 million to capital fund balances. On February 14, 2022, the Village Finance Committee discussed and recommended approval of this tentative biennial budget document. A draft was available for public inspection on May 3rd, 2022 at the Village Hall, the Public Safety Building, and the Library, as well as online at the Village website at lakebluff.org. I have to say that I'm getting really hit by jet lag right now, and it's really hard to read that. I'm still at +7 right now. So I hope I was clear enough, and it was important. Sorry about that. Questions?
I just had a couple comments. I think I talked to Drew about this earlier, but I just wanted to say this because I didn't always get a chance to say everything I wanted to say at the Finance Committee meeting just because of time constraints. I think to me, as I've said at previous meetings, especially last year when we were talking about property taxes, I think we have to be extremely mindful when we approve this budget of the potential for changes. In our sales tax revenue. I recently read that half of all cars that are being delivered were already sold last year. So I just think we need to be mindful of this. A lot of the people that had discretionary income that come to, say, Target, for example, don't, because gas is $5 a gallon in certain cases. And this isn't going to change. So while this is somewhat conservative, what I don't see is I see spending that is not necessary to the continuing just operating of the village at a basic level. And that worries me because I sometimes feel like I'm alone in this worldview, but I always feel like I have to say it. It's other people's money, but also that things are, at least in the projections I'm reading, not necessarily going to change for a long time supply chain-wise. Toyota's suspended production of cars in certain cases. I mean, things are not that great. So while I realize this is a working document, what I'm always concerned about is that if it's in here, that it's, the idea is that we actually have it to spend. So I sometimes feel like I'm yelling into a cave. But nevertheless, I just want to have that said on the record. I'm not a big fan of putting stuff in here that I don't think we should be doing at this juncture, given the uncertainty of the future. I think what's going on in Europe right now could impact the rest here, the United States in some ways. So that wasn't the case when these finance committee meetings were occurring. We're in a much different position right now. So I just think we should be much more conservative than this budget is outlined in certain circumstances.
Kate, your point is very well taken, and we had a 7.5% market contraction in the last 2 months, I think,
Yes,
somewhere there.
10. Around.
So, I mean, your point is well taken. We also need to, we don't know what the future will bear, but we also need to establish a direction for the village. And so I know that we need to be very careful, but we also need to move forward. And I'm not negating anything you have said, by the way. I'm not trying to say that.
No, I agree, but I think, for example, the one thing that came up at one of the finance committee meetings was the Block 1 project, and the idea that we'd move forward with a nearly $1 million project at a time. Those are the kind of things that I have a hard time wrapping my head around under the current circumstances. It's just difficult for me to understand how, in the face of that, and then later in the year, come to everybody with our hands out for a potentially 5% property tax increase. May not affect everybody equally, but it at some point, it just starts to layer on. So I'm saying this to the people generally out there in the world. I think we just have to be mindful of that. There are people here in town that are feeling this. They may not shout it from the rooftops, but they are. And a 10% correction has hit people, and we have a lot of people here who are retired. And that's probably hurt them pretty badly. So I'm just saying that I hope this thing is malleable and that we are able to recognize as things, you know, that we too are flexible. I'm sure you would tell me that we are.
Well, I did want to,
Reassure me,
well,
Finance
I
Committee
did want to
Chair.
point out that we have, you know, this biennial budget so that there isn't that use it or lose it mentality. And I think that staff has been very responsive to creating a list of options for us when we see challenges looming. Just as we did throughout the pandemic, we were given, you know, methods to handle those various degrees of unknowns. There are always unknowns, but I think that the village has positioned itself very strongly and given us the ability to make decisions when they need to be made. And we also are making plans that are consistent with village goals and giving us the most options available. I continue to be, you know, pleasantly surprised by some of the numbers with, you know, sales tax and, you know, gloom and doom, but then, you know, here come the sales. So we all read the paper. We all are aware of, you know, numbers that are being thrown around by economic forecasts, and we're bearing that in mind. And I continue to rely on staff to look at those projections and give us good advice for what are some of the levers we can pull if we feel like things are trending in a direction that we need to adjust. So it may be that we change what we, you know, put in reserves. It may be that we apply for grants, or we may find out that these things are no longer available. But I continue to be impressed with our staff and the options they provide to us and the information that they give to us so that we can make good decisions. And part of the, again, Block 1 information that we were given and the discussions that we had were to prepare us to have more options available. It was not a plan that's, you know, we're stepping on the gas and we're not looking back. So I appreciate your perspective on a lot of things. I think we're both surprised that we agree with each other more than we thought we would. But your comments are a strength, and your input is part of what makes us as a body better. And I'm glad we don't all think alike, but sometimes we do and you just don't know it.
So, and to complement what you just said, Barb, that is, I do fully agree with that. We established plan 2 years ago before the pandemic to spend money in different area, and which shows the plan, the budget is is indicative, not a commitment, a full and transition commitment. We established a plan 2 years ago for a few items in the village for capital improvement, bridge lights, for example, and cameras on the train station, that we decided not to execute. And in some cases, we said, okay, we're doing well enough to invest in that area, but not in that area. And we saw those improvements coming. We're still missing lights, for example, on the path, and people are asking for it, but we chose not to do that because we had to be careful. And I believe that, and this is to really compliment Andrew and his staff, but we have to establish a strategic plan. This is what the budget is. Whether we execute on it because we have adverse events is our choice and us being wise, but we need to move forward with a plan. And so we might never spend the money, but at least we know that we can spend the money if we choose so, because we've established for it. We have planned for it.
Yeah, I'll just add as well, I do appreciate Trustee Brienne's concern about the future, because it is a good heads up for us, but to me, it doesn't mean that we kind of just pull back like a turtle and just stop doing things. I think we are responsible. We have our general fund is at the highest point that it's been. I think that in particular, Trustee Brienne cited the possibility of doing work on Block 1. And in my mind, and it's okay to have different opinions, it's an imperative that we do that. Right now we have kind of an unoptimal area over there. There are a lot of young people that really love the vibe of Lake Bluff. That Block 1 is really significant part of that. And I don't know, I've been to Bluffinia, there's a lot of kids, there's a lot of baby strollers, there's a lot of people that want activity here. And as long as we invest in a responsible way, and the way that we've talked about that is if we get a grant to do the majority of it, then we'll do it. If we don't, we won't. But I don't think it makes sense for us to stop trying to provide services and things that our residents care about because, yeah, maybe the market's down 10%, maybe it'll go down 20, but it's up 50% over the past few years. And people have done really well. So I think we need to keep progressing. My point of view.
I just wanted to add that I think, since 2020, when the pandemic hit, the ability for our community and the staff in the village to be nimble in how they determine budgets and spend money, to me, was impressive. The fact that we were able to adjust things quickly. And Bettina, in general, really did a great job, Drew too, probably as well, for trying to forecast out and doing the best thing for our village. So I understand the uncertainty, Trustee Brand. I also understand your concerns about the CPI next year. I too have that concern, and I am confident that this body will look at those numbers when the time comes around next year, and will be very thoughtful in how we determine the CPI when it happens for us. So I don't want you to think that your comments are falling on deaf ears. I definitely share some of your concerns, and as we move forward, I think I take comfort in knowing that the budget can be adjusted and that the staff is quite nimble at doing that.
That was the word I was looking for, by the way. Yeah. Nimble. I think, and I appreciate all that. I'm not looking for, compliments. I'm just saying that sometimes I feel it's a pretty lonely seat where I'm sitting. But nevertheless, I'm not a martyr. To the Block 1 point, I'll just make one final point. We'd be improving an area around a couple establishments that probably net us about 20 grand a year in sales tax revenue. So that's a whole hell of a lot of money to invest in something that there's no ROI whatsoever. And I hear it. We can change. We are nimble. We are flexible. But I guess I'm henny penny, and I see the sky falling. So that's just the way I am. That's probably, like I said, I'm the only person that feels that way. But I have to say it because it has to be on the record, and I know there are people similarly situated. And
I would actually disagree with you on stating that you're the only one having that on your mind. We all have that on our mind. And you are voicing that more than we do. And I do appreciate that, by the way. I'm not saying this is a bad thing. But I believe that we are not spending our money, we're spending the community money. And this is the important part. And I feel very concerned and I have a lot of angst about that. Now, we need to move forward with our community. We cannot kick the can down the road on a few items, investment-wise or infrastructure-wise. So it's hard. It's not an easy subject for me personally, for example.
So I'd like to just comment on the observation that you made. It's an interesting observation to point out the sales tax revenue from the participant or the businesses on Block 1, but I think most of us agree that it's not just about those businesses that we want to improve Block 1. It's the entire environment downtown that draws people to that location. And I think your point is very well taken about the parking. I think we have to address that. And it's possible we could go back to status quo ante and get us the parking and do nothing else. But I think we have a unique opportunity to address both this kind of vibrancy that we're talking about that doesn't just benefit those businesses that are right there, but benefits the entire downtown, as well as get that street parking back to a position of normal. So I'm not sure it's part of the budget discussion, but I do think we need to keep focusing on how to get those 20 spots back, to your earlier point.
And I'd just like to, I guess, add my last word on the Block 1 piece, because the biggest picture for me is to make Lake Bluff a destination of choice. And that's both as a place to visit and a place to live. So the big picture for me is if this is a destination or a place that people want to live, it helps with our real estate values. It helps with our overall community.
I always think that's so funny. I've lived here for more or less 50 years, and I think it has been that all along without any changes. So that's just my 2 cents for all the old timers. So to speak. And my parents thought that, and so did my grandparents. So without any changes.
Thank you. Any more comments before we move on to a vote? Last comments? Last comments? We're done. Next. So if hearing no questions, clerk, please call the roll.
It's a voice vote, it's an ordinance.
It's an ordinance.
Yeah, it
First
says
reading.
It's voice vote. It says roll call.
So this is a voice vote again, so all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? This motion carries. Thank you. Next is I lost my track. Item 15, an ordinance comprehensively amending the village's historic preservation regulations and the regulations governing the Historic Preservation Commission Title 2 and Title 9, Chapter 14 of the Municipal Code. Is there a motion to approve this ordinance?
So moved?
A second.
Second.
Thank you. Over the past 4 years, the HPC has studied changes to Lake Bluff's historic preservation regulations which provide for the designation and protection of features that have special significance in the history and development of Lake Bluff. In early 2021, the HPC recommended and the village board discussed a package of certain changes to the village historic preservation rules. At that time, the board was interested in further HPC study of incentives, branding, and education, and did not take any action to change the village's historic preservation rules. In November 2021, the HPC recommended that the village board adopt certain administrative improvements that were included in its rewrite. The COW discussed this item at its February 28th meeting and reached a consensus that the administrative improvements should be considered at an upcoming meeting. As directed by the HPC and the COW, the attached ordinance is a comprehensive rewrite of the village historic preservation rules. It includes numerous administrative and ease of use improvements and omits substantive policy changes that would tend to expedite or discourage the demolition of structures in the village. The attached summary provides further detail. Questions and comments on this board, and this was long coming. I mean, I joined the board in April 2020 or 2019, and it was the first presentation Joy and I had by Steve Cross. This work is absolutely significant to our village. And I do thank Steve Cross for the humongous work and thought process that went into this document.
And rework, I mean, right?
Yeah, it was.
The iterations on this have been immense.
And the document shows it's very, very high quality, very substantive, and very significant.
So I had a question, when we talked about this at the committee of the whole, this summary, which shows the things that are included, it's kind of a high level, the green part, green light go, these are the things included. Then there were some things that were excluded that tended to expedite, and items also that were excluded that tend to preserve. That summary is not different from when we had the meeting a couple of weeks ago, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, the thing that we discussed at that meeting as well, that I had some questions and concerns about, related to
Incentives.
these financial incentives. And so none of that is in here. It could be discussed at a future point in time, but none of that is in what we're discussing tonight.
Correct, those have been referred to, the financial incentives have been referred to the Finance Committee for further analysis and discussion, and then the zoning, additional zoning relief related to preservation, those recommendations were referred to the Planning Commission Zoning Board of Appeals for their further input, and then it will come back to you all.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, because it's a lot of information, and as we said, we keep going over this so many times that you start glazing and you can't remember where we are, but I think that this summary is really good.
I actually had a question. Right at the end of our committee of the whole meeting, one of the HPC members brought up the fact that outside.
We did get a motion, didn't I?
You have a motion and a second.
Yeah,
Yes, we do.
so we can
That-
focus on Joy now.
No, that's okay.
It's all about you.
I just, she mentioned that outside entities are still allowed to landmark properties without a property owner's permission. So in this discussion here, the museum has taken itself out of that list. The History Museum used to be able to landmark without a property owner's permission, but still in the language is that the village can do that, and members of the HPC commissioner can do that as well. Am I right, Drew? The
Yeah,
HPC?
one or more commissioners,
Yeah.
the village board of trustees, and an owner of property. But to be clear, that's.
apply.
Can apply,
Apply.
but
Not
the
force.
board is the decision maker.
Yeah.
Okay,
So they can make application, but you all decide if that's gonna be a landmark or not.
okay.
Backstop's still there.
Okay, so because I feel like we did have an incident, I'm not sure if you all were on the board yet, I don't think you were, where a homeowner had plans to go ahead and put a new house up and was going to demolish a small home on a large piece of property, and it was forcibly landmarked, which caused this homeowner to have to go in and rework all their plans. And from a financial standpoint, it cost the homeowner a lot of money, the property owner a lot of money to rework everything. And I think for me, I just sort of wondered, you're walking a fine line of fairness there, right? The property owner buys a piece of property and may not know that the house is significant or has some sort of historic relevance, and then decides they want to do some changes, and then all of a sudden it's almost like everyone's against them because they've decided to make the home actually updated and more beautiful. and raise the values of property around their house, so, or around their, around the area. So I just thought maybe that I just thought it was worthwhile to bring that up. We didn't have time at the cow. It was brought up right at the end of the cow meeting, and no one had a chance to really discuss it. And I thought it did have a little bit of merit, because I kind of put myself in the place of that homeowner, that property owner, and I think, wow, I don't, how would I feel if all of a sudden people were telling me, okay, now your home is landmarked, and now you're gonna have to wait another 160, 180 days to go ahead and make your changes. And I just didn't know what the rest of this board, kind of their opinions on that. I would prefer to see things landmarked clearly by the property owner. I think that's the route we always want to go. But the idea that someone else could landmark your property to me seems unfair. It seems like it's not fair, and I'm struggling with that piece a little bit.
I was under the impression that this was a kind of a middle ground of where you could be designated a landmark, but that kind of the covenants that came with it, you could overrule it. So you would not be penalized the number of days or encumbered in some sort of cost.
No, you would be. You can be.
You can be delayed, you can't be prevented.
Yeah, ultimately,
could-
the property
nothing
owner
prevents
has,
demolition.
there's a designated process they go through, but at the end of the day, the property owner can make those changes.
Okay, so it just takes more time.
I think the important part is what Steve was forced to achieve was a middle ground between complete conservation and complete destruction of the spirit of our village. So the work from Steve was very much, okay, you cannot just prevent people from enjoying the fruits of their property, or you cannot have developers coming in town and start basically creating something that does not look like what Lake Bluff is. So we were trying to put financial incentive to say you should seriously consider that property as being an historic property and do something according to the spirit of Lake Bluff with it. And so I don't think we can win either ways. That is the problem. We can try to get people to think more about it. We cannot prevent them, but at least think about what you just got. Think about where you just bought in this community. I don't think there is a perfect fit for that
Topic, that
topic.
piece.
To me, there is a solution that the community, I've been to a lot of HPC meetings on this before I was a trustee, that the community's just determined not to do, and that's historic districts. And with respect to everybody, I think we're trying to have it both ways. We can't be a place that values history and allow it to be torn down. You have to make a choice. It's a difficult one, I grant you. Our neighbor to the south does it. They have 5, and it's great. I could list so many communities all around Chicago that have them and all across the United States. That is the solution. There's a lot of misinformation out there about historic districts that is perpetuated by people who don't want them. But there's a ton of education that would need to happen for people to appreciate what would be a contributing and non-contributing property. And I hear you in what you're saying, but by the same token, old buildings matter. They matter in certain parts of the world more than others, and they matter on our coasts more than they do, for some reason, in the middle of the country. I don't know why. People brag about living in an 18th century home out east. That's great. Here, we're trying to have it both ways, and I think we just have to come to the conclusion that if we do not have historic districts, we have no mechanism to protect homes from being torn down. As Mr. Friedman just points out, all we're doing is forestalling the inevitable. Financial incentives might work. My concern was, Drew just mentioned, was the increasing the footprint on the property. I think that's a potential huge problem that we're saying, is not equitable. You couldn't do it to a camp meeting house on a 25-foot wide lot, but you can do it to a giant Victorian that's on a half acre. That doesn't seem fair. And then what about the people that don't have historic homes and are not allowed to increase the bulk? So there is a solution, but then we would have to actually do it, and then we would protect pieces of property. So then the question just is, how badly do you want to protect these incredibly unique homes that are here, or not? And that, to me, it's easy. I think you protect them, but that's really the only mechanism that we have. And Peter would be able to opine more on what historic districts allow and don't allow as far as demolition. But if we want to keep these homes, that's, I think, the only way forward. So there really is a solution. It's just not one I think people are willing to embrace.
People have not been willing to embrace that.
I know. And yet they're successful all over the country. So I'm just trying to figure out, what is it that's so distasteful about them? I mean, we go to places to see these. We're talking about making this a destination. It can't just be up here. I mean, walking tours, we seek out these places all the time on vacation, but we don't want to live there. And I just think it's kind of, I think that's kind of odd. So that's my 2 cents on that one. Or 5 cents, or maybe 10.
Well, I already spoke, I'll let somebody else go.
Maybe it was a whole dollar.
Steve?
I appreciate what Kate is saying, and I agree. I think, I almost look at this as an interim step. I don't think we've solved everything, but I think the question in front of us is this a good enough interim step for us to at least get some protection and some incentives in place? And I do think it is. I do battle with what Joy said. I had misread it previously to really encumber somebody and force them to become historic and delay. I personally struggle with that, but I think we ought to move forward with this in some way, shape, or form. That one piece I struggle with.
I concur.
Barb, sorry.
Yeah, I concur. I don't have a whole lot to add. I think that the HPC spent a lot of time trying to figure out for our community and our unique mix of residents and everything, what does this area have the stomach and the heart for? And I think this is a process that has taken them a very long time, and this is their best and brightest answer for right now. It may change. I mean, this village continues to change, and this is the best answer they have at the time.
Thank you, Barb.
I had a question for Drew. Could we go ahead and approve this and then task the HBC, say, we want to look a little bit further at the, I mean, I'm sure they would not.
Would they all leave mass exit for the door? I mean, these people have achieved sainthood in trying to.
And I guess my other question, Drew, would be is how often have we used that forcible landmark?
Well, again, the board has to say yes, right? Whoever makes applications goes through a process.
Right, but by the time it gets to us, usually it's pretty contentious, and, I mean, I'm just being honest.
Have we ever approved a landmark against the owner's consent?
Yeah,
We have?
I thought Prospect and
Maybe
Moffett.
the East School.
Right, maybe,
So the school district with the East School.
Yeah,
So maybe that one.
but a single-family resident,
that just happened, Prospect and Moffett, that guy on the corner.
I'm trying to remember if the Blair home was landmarked.
Yeah.
The Keck and Keck house?
Yes.
I'm sure Landmarks Illinois would have considered. What about the house on the 200 block of Prospect?
I think we're digress.
That was,
I'm just saying, like, by the time it comes in front of us,
I think it has happened from time to time is the answer, yes. So, but again, the board can always choose that, and I think that HBC themselves, and one of the items on that summary page talks about, one of the items that was excluded to this was, in the middle bullet there, a prohibition on the village nominating a property as a landmark during a pending demolition application after a certain date. You know, the idea that there was some hand-wringing over somebody submits a demolition application, all of a sudden the board's like, oh, we better landmark that. There was some, people didn't like to do that, and the HBC doesn't like to do that, and that's why that came up, but that was one of those items that was excluded. Again, this was kind of the middle of the road, like, what can we do that's more administrative in nature to make the ordinance work better without having significant and substantive policy changes within it. So, but to answer your first question, of course, you all can refer that back to them. Do they feel like they've been working in the coal mine for a very
my
long
goodness.
time?
No, yeah,
Probably.
no. I'm,
Yeah,
I feel like everything else in this document, and they've worked so hard on, and I'm so appreciative of, and I really do feel like they've spent a lot of time and a lot of energy and really put a lot of thought into it, which I fully appreciate. I think that was the only piece that I felt like was just sort of hanging out there, and it's
It was not part specifically of this
Difficult.
HPC package, right? That recommendation did not come through as part of this package. But I think they're probably looking for their next 3 to 5 year reprieve on analyzing this. Till the next significant tear down triggers another avalanche of concerns, right?
Susan, you wanted to make a comment.
And I've forgotten what it was, but,
sorry.
no. I'm interested in understanding more about what the resistance to the historic districts has been. But one thing that may set us apart is the way in which the buildings were put up here as camp homes. Were not necessarily put up as multi-century homes, not all of them. They were put up as summer camp homes. My house was originally put up as a summer camp home, and then later became something much more significant, but, within a few decades rather than a few centuries. But, so there's a lot of variety amongst what would be the historic district, some of which is, very significant homes, and many of which maybe have been in the same family for many years and haven't had significant updates, and maybe wouldn't be some that most people would be able to continue to improve upon as the years go by. I sat in on a description of the castle's metamorphosis over the years. I sat in on a meeting regarding that, and what it started as was a little cottage and became what it is now. And at what point is history made? Was history made when they put up the camp cottage, or was it somehow made thereafter? So, in any event, I think there's maybe a wide variety within our East Lake Bluff in particular area of construction, of timing of the construction, of the purpose behind the construction when it was first made, that gives rise to a lot of disparate views about what ought to be done going forward. Just a guesstimate about what it might be different about this town's resistance. That said, I think the HPC has done yeoman's work in coming up with a compromise here, and that they've presented it as their best effort to come up with something that will work for the community, and so we ought to support it, at the very least as an interim measure.
Thank you. I would like to say before a vote that I don't think there is a right answer. I think that Steve was, as we say in French, he was carrying this resolution as a cross, and it took him 5 years to get there. I don't think there is a right answer. I don't think there is a wrong answer. I think we have to protect our community for what is historical. Define that. I don't know how to define that. What is historical? I live in a country where we take the old and we make it fit to people being able to live in it. And the walls in my parents' house are about a yard worth of cold stone. And guess what? Wi-Fi doesn't go with it, to my dismay, and we have to live with it, okay? But the point is, we have to live with our community. We have to make it work. We don't want things to be destroyed. We don't want things to be classified against their will to be historical. And I would really agree with Steve is not done. We need to reassess that in the next 2 or 3 years to see how we have lived through it. I don't think Steve wants to take it more, but he might have to, or we might have to revise, and it's a normal process. But I believe that we need to protect what we have today. Okay, I'll leave it at that. Do we have more questions?
No more questions.
All right, this is a It's
First
a,
reading.
it's a first reading, it's a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Wow. This motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you. Next item is item 16. No, 17, thank you. Item 17. A resolution authorizing the execution of a construction engineering services agreement with Gewalt Hamilton Associates, Inc. for the Village of Lake Bluff fiscal year 2023 roadway improvement program. Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Thank you. In conjunction with the award of construction contract to Peter Baker and Son Construction for the Village fiscal year 2023 roadway improvement projects, the village has solicited a proposal from the professional engineering firm Gewalt Hamilton Associates, Inc. of Vernon Hills, Illinois, for the necessary construction observation, project administration, and materials testing services required for implementation of a roadway resurfacing and patching work. Payment will be made on an hourly basis to include profit and overhead at the hourly rates as specified in the agreement. A cost not to exceed the amount of $39,172 is specified without additional written authorization from the village. The village proposed fiscal year 2023 budget includes funds for the necessary construction observation services. The village engineer recommends adoption of the attached resolution approving the construction engineering service agreement. Questions? No questions? It is a,
Voice vote.
it's a voice vote again. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? This resolution passes. It was a first reading, or it's a?
That's it.
That's it, thank you. Next is item 18. A resolution authorizing the execution of a construction contract with Peter Baker and Son Company, Inc. for the Village of Lake Bluff fiscal year 2023 street improvement program. Could I please have a motion to approve this ordinance?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Thank you. The Village of Lake Bluff partnered with the City of Lake Forest to jointly bid the fiscal year 2023 street improvement program. The village's scope of work includes street resurfacing, street patching, resurfacing of the village's Walnut Avenue parking lot. In an effort to achieve economies of scale, the joint procurement process was undertaken that yielded 3 bids. The lowest bid was submitted by Peter Baker and Son of Lake Bluff, Illinois, with an amount attributable to Lake Bluff's portion of the work at the price of $463,397.76. The comparison to the unit prices the village received for the fiscal year 2022 street resurfacing program shows that the prices of the current bid are approximately 8% higher than the prior year. The village proposed fiscal year 2023 budget includes a total of $600,000 for the street improvement program, which is more than adequate to fund all related activities, including the construction engineering and design engineering for the fiscal year 2024 project. Village staff intends to add additional resurfacing and patching work during the project to utilize most of the remaining budget, which will require a future change order. Since Peter Baker and Son has performed street improvement projects in the village for many years and has proven to be capable of completing the work, the village engineer is recommending that the village board award the contract to Peter Baker and Son for the amount of $463,397.76. Questions on the board?
I just had one question. Is Jeff with us?
He is.
The description of work at the end, Mountain Avenue, there's no approximate length or approximate area? Is that included in the bid, or?
It's 100%. It's from beginning to end because it only goes.
That was,
Gotcha.
I combined, I combined Sunrise and Mountain, so that quantity is the next line down. It's both of them because it's one contiguous stretch.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Jeff, I don't know why, $463,000 for the Walnut parking lot seems enormous to me. Are there some complexities that make that job so expensive, or am I just out of touch? I mean, you got 3 bids. It just is a shocking number for the square foot.
So
For the whole thing?
that's the total, amount, all streets and the Walnut lot.
Yeah.
Thank you. You and I didn't touch base today.
No, we did not. I left you a voicemail.
That would be an alarming amount.
It would be.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Well, but it's high. And I mean, this goes to the point, the conversation the board's been having over the last several months, looking at different sources of revenue to fund certain activities, is like, it's up 8% this year. And it's just like, how much can the village keep investing in all its assets in a reliable manner?
I think this is the kind of illustrates what I was trying to say. The producer price index is almost 10%. So that's my point, right here, is that we're going to feel this everywhere, and we're going to continue to feel it. So that's a good example of it.
And the problem is we have infrastructure that is decaying as well.
I realize that. I'm certainly not suggesting we don't do this. What I'm suggesting is that this is what needs to be done. We've got needs and wants. And this is a need, and then there are wants. And we have to be willing to differentiate them when we go to spend. So this is a good example of a need. I would never say that this was frivolous. It just is more, and that 8% is about the exactly where the CPI is. CPI is at 7.8%, and PPI is at 9.8, almost 10.
So
it's just reflective.
But you're achieving your goal, Kate. That is, we discussed it and we're all aware of it, and we all. I mean, I don't feel good about it. So this is okay, We are achieving the goal of being conscious about what we spend.
I'm not suggesting we're not. I'm simply saying that 8% higher was illustrative of my point earlier.
Yep.
That's all.
Thank you. Any more comments? All right. So this is a roll call. A clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Rappin.
Aye.
Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Trustee Inkman.
Aye.
Trustee Brienne.
Aye.
Trustee Markey.
Aye.
Thank you. Next is item number 19, an ordinance granting variations from a village floor area ratio and building coverage restrictions for 562 Sunrise Avenue. Is there a motion to approve this ordinance?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. On January 20, 2022, the Village of Lake Bluff received a zoning variation application from Donald Shoemaker and Kim Parkinson, jointly applicants, for zoning relief necessary to renovate the interior and exterior of a property and add a covered screened-in porch to the rear of a single-family residence located at 562 Sunrise Avenue. The existing building does not conform with the village floor area ratio limitation, and the proposed work would increase both the floor area, 62% variation, and building coverage, 4% variation of a building beyond the maximums established by the zoning regulations. At its March 10 meeting, the PCCBA conducted a public hearing to consider the variations and unanimously recommended that the village board grant the requested relief with no special conditions. Questions? Comments?
I would comment, a 62% variation is enormous. I'm not sure, Drew, do you know, is there already a large variance on the floor? And this is just increasing that slightly?
Glenn, could you, I don't want to, I think I know the answer, but I don't want to misspeak.
Yeah, I'm pulling up the exact number now, but that's correct, Trustee Rappin. So this property is coming in at about 52%, and it's being added to only slightly, really, but for a very technical issue in interpreting the code, it would actually be even smaller. The one particular of the design of this screened-in porch they're adding means that it counts towards FAR. Most screened-in porches do not.
Yeah, so
So
Glenn, just
go ahead.
the short answer, it's about,
Just about 500 square feet.
yeah, it's the existing nonconformity is 2,200 plus square feet. So this is a net 500.
Yeah, okay.
And that's, there's an existing nonconformity as well with the, actually not with the building coverage, that's just a minor one of 158 square feet, total of 4%, it's a teeny amount.
Yeah, and so knowing that it's already over 50% variation, just, oh, Regis, you don't have to raise your hand, you just go. You're the boss. Maybe Glenn or Drew, do we have many homes in the village that have a variance of a 50 or 60% on floor area? Is that common?
Is it common? I mean, if it's, I don't know if it's common, but
Yeah.
it's, if, where it is, it's non-conforming, there's other structures that have been built.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the cottages, Glenda, would you estimate the cottages and how much they're over? Just, do you know?
I'm not as familiar with the cottages. I mean, generally speaking, these rules were established in the mid-90s. Most of the village's housing stock was established before that time. The rule, in some respects, tries to follow what was here, but it's
imperfect.
It is not uncommon to run into houses that are substantially over.
And Glenn, does this architectural style with the way that the floor area is determined with its large overhang areas there from the roof line, is that what's contributing a lot to the floor area?
Yeah, it's really driven more by a couple things. So one, if this house was built less than a year earlier, the basement would be exempt from floor area. Because it's not, it comes too far out from grade, so the basement counts. That's a large chunk of it. The second is being introduced by the owner right now. That's the screened-in porch and the particulars of the design of that. Basically, if there were a lattice element instead of windows, that wouldn't count. And then there's a couple other particularities with the outside deck as well that just owes to the architectural style. I'll note the style is distinct on the east side, and members of the PCZBA in deliberating this noted that it's very low in height and appears low slung from the street in making the recommendation.
I'd like to just point out that in a neighborhood with second and third stories, this house is really at 1.5 stories, low scale, right? Because the basement rises maybe 6 feet above ground, and that's why it has to be counted in the floor area, et cetera. But it is essentially a floor and a half worth of exposed area for everyone. It's also a beautiful house that they're making more beautiful. It's a 1950 house that a different owner might have torn it down and started over just to more efficiently use the space. I think this is exactly the kind of home that we want to support. Though I gasped when I saw 62% over, I think this is exactly the kind of thing that our ordinances should allow for, something that makes sense, although it doesn't fit nicely into the numerical calculations we usually need to rely upon.
Thank you.
I'm wondering a couple of things. I think the biggest thing is, in reading this and looking at the pictures, it seems like there was an after little comment about how to make allowance for the pool, something. And so I'm looking at these images going, wait,
Pool?
Is there an existing pool? Is there going to be a pool? I mean, we're being so cognizant of, impermeable surface and FAR. Is there a pool? Am I reading this properly?
Yeah, trustee Inkerman, there's not a pool now. There is proposed to be a pool in the future that that is within the impervious surface limits on this lot. So that's not part of this variation. Whether or not you grant the variation, they'd still be able to construct that pool.
Right, so, I mean, I don't understand the technicalities of all of the rules and the codes, but the idea is that there are lots of nuances. For instance, this screen porch, if these upper elements were, this screen porch doesn't qualify for that porch bonus because it has these glass transom windows, and if it had different types of treatment, then it would. You know, all of these things, it's like, well, they're not taking advantage of that by changing some of these elements. That doesn't really affect impervious surface, but that's something that I don't know why is the rule there if in this case, we're not saying, oh, change those windows and then it doesn't qualify. I don't know. I don't understand that. And I don't understand how the pool, which, I mean, think about a pool, how impervious that is.
I know.
I can't, when I weigh all those things together, I just think, why are we doing this? I love the idea of creating an environment where people want to preserve things and make them more beautiful and more functional. I agree. I also, on the other hand, don't want to create more water problems. And I don't see how the pool factors in and why in this particular case, we're willing to say, oh, we have these kinds of technicalities so that FAR can be calculated in the big picture, and yet we're not asking them to avail themselves of making some changes so that it does have a lesser FAR. Because there are other times that, you know, the FAR, you're 230 square feet over, but you've got to change your plans and
Right.
you've got to do all these other things and jump through these hoops. So I'm really struggling with all of those things and how to say yes to this. I'm really struggling with that.
Is there anyone, Drew, is there anyone on the line representing the builder
Or the,
anyone?
Yeah.
That could speak to that?
That's awake.
yeah.
Well, I don't think the applicant's present. They don't appear to, they're not in the village hall, number one, but they're not, I don't see anybody that I think is attached to this petition on the call. Are you aware of anybody, or the applicants? Am I missing that? There's a 224 number. I'm not certain who that is.
Yeah, I spoke with the applicant's architect this afternoon. From that conversation, I suspect they may have thought they were done last Thursday, to be honest with you. It says in our application materials and the motion is a recommendation to the village board, but it sounds like they may have misunderstood that. So that might be part of why they're not here. We can certainly ask them to appear and speak to you at second reading, and also go over now or at a different time some of the technical issues when it comes to FAR and this pool and other things as well.
Barbara, thank you for pointing that out. I had not noticed that, although on one of the pictures I thought, is that a pool? Right? But let me understand the calculations. If we weren't looking at modifications to the building right now, they just came to the village and said, we're going to put in a pool, the amount of surface that they were planning to cover with a pool would not be subject to our review. Is that what you're saying? It wouldn't be above any cutoff?
I think it would depend on the design. But it's not, the pool, correct me if I'm wrong, Glenn, but the pools are not treated as building coverage, and that the pool decking would be considered impervious. The pool itself is not. Is that correct, Glenn? Or is the pool?
The water containment area is impervious as well. So if it helps clear this up, in short, in Lake Bluff, we have 3 of these area rules. Floor area is 3D, that's inside the building. Building coverage is 2D, that's just inside the walls. And then impervious surface is surfaces that generate runoff. So that's all of your building coverage plus those paved areas. So a pool in Lake Bluff only counts towards that third one, impervious surface. And they're not seeking a variation from that here. We haven't seen, a pool design to have impervious calculations for it to know how close or how far they are. But if they would go over that limit, they wouldn't be able to get a permit.
And we don't know whether or not their design will require that or not.
Yeah, and Glenn, does the current analysis include, was that part of the calculations they submitted or not?
Yeah, that was part of the calculations. I can pull that up. Again, I don't think that reflects the number of any proposed pool in there. But generally, I recall it had there was room to spare.
Wow.
But to your point, Trustee Ankerman, earlier, this was, I think this is exactly what the HPC was probably thinking about, homes that are, maybe on the bubble, somebody may try to knock it down or consider something else, that somebody may say, hey, maybe we can do an addition and get treated differently, based off the new set of standards, which are not on the books today. But maybe that's not on the books today, right? The idea
Yeah.
but.
The whole comparison of, if it had been built less than a year before, just, it wasn't. So that's not a relevant argument.
We're just, in this situation, though, we're not approving the pool. We're just approving the porch.
But the pool's by right. They can do
Right.
it.
Right, but we still have to see what, it's in that third grouping, right? So it would still have to come in front of us.
It's not part of this relief request.
Part of this.
Right.
But
I don't know if it has to come in front of us or not, is the question.
They did the calculation, so Drew, I'm looking at, and Glenn at the
Impervious surface stuff?
page 239 of the packet. They did the calculation. I don't know, they have existing impervious surface at 4,300 and change, proposed a little over 6,000, and then it says conforms.
So on a lot of this size, it would be 50% of the lot area. So you could get about a little over 6,500.
And the comment I made about the screen porch, if you did different windows or transom treatment, what would that gain? Is it, do we care about 150 square feet? Or do we not care about 150 square, why would we let one, has the resident worked to the best of their ability, and do we care? I don't know.
Yeah, generally speaking, the village hopes that applicants are seeking the actual minimum zoning relief necessary, right?
And it doesn't sound like that is.
Well, I don't know. Glenn, in terms of, I don't know if they showed during the public hearing, did they show they had other plans that they considered, but this fit certain objectives? I don't know if that was part of their presentation or not.
Yeah, that wasn't part of the presentation or part of the discussion by the commissioners. But the commissioners thought this was and there was very little discussion on the request. It was well received.
I guess the other thing that I would point out is the daylight plane height restriction is something that is impacted significantly by 2- and 3-story homes. And I think, from looking at it, it's about 1.5 stories because of where the basement sits. And they're not proposing to make any changes to that. I do see what you're saying, no impervious surface or change. So you think this 6052 is with the pool, is the impervious surface change?
Guys,
No, FAR is not pool at all.
I know, it says impervious surface coverage is what I'm looking at now. But suffice to say, if it's as of right, it's as of right. I stand by my position that they're doing, nice work on a home that we like to preserve.
So I think that, let me try to create a consensus here, because I hear a lot of things that are being said that is, they are improving the property. From my standpoint, I don't understand the calculations because there are exceptions to the calculation that are making the calculation hard to comprehend or to trust, because there's exception to the calculation, but
I trust the numbers. I'm not saying I don't trust the numbers. I'm saying that the numbers being 62%, if they were to change this one thing on the windows, maybe it would be 150 square feet less, and do we care about that? I
And
mean,
that would be my point right there, that is, maybe if a calculation is misleading, or the result of that calculation is misleading given the parameters. I mean, I'm trying to make your point, Barbara. I'm not saying that you were.
right, and I'm saying that's not my point. Thank you for trying to summarize my point, but that isn't my point.
So, we do not have anybody to advocate for this thing right here. So what I'm about to put on the table or to propose is let's delay that and let's have on our next meeting more discussion about this with people advocating for the design.
Okay.
I would like to do that.
Okay?
Yeah, and I really do think supporting historical homes and not tearing them down, I'm all for all that. But I just know that other residents who want to do good things to make their houses more livable and beautiful come up against these issues. And, oh, you're the house by the lake? So, oh, and you want to put, oh, okay, yes, sir, yes. And I don't want that appearance. I want to really fully vet out
Okay.
why we wouldn't press for all the technical things.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sound like that pressing in those questions were asked.
I do believe that we're not having answers to the questions we
Right,
have on this
right.
board. And I believe that we should invite
Yes.
architects and owners to come and present for us and to answer those questions. Even though PCCB has done their work, we're not getting the answers we need here.
Yes, and I do think that we'll be able to make a better decision.
So that is a consensus, I hear.
Yeah.
Let's move forward to.
You have the motion on the
to
table.
defer.
Just as member Rappin can amend his motion to,
Or just need a motion to defer to the next board meeting.
I'd like to make a motion to defer to the next board meeting.
I'll second that.
Second.
Thank you.
Voice vote.
It's a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion to defer passes. Thank you. Next item is item 1921. Now we are on 22. So item 21 was deferred.
well, I would like to ask you not consider this yet tonight. This is something I would like the board to pick up 2 weeks from tonight. There's some other information that we're trying to get from Comcast. And so just asking you to punt on this one as well.
Happily.
Oh, darn.
So item 21, I would entertain a motion to defer as well.
I'd make a motion to defer till next board meeting.
Second?
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? This motion to defer passes. Thank you. Next item is item number 22. An ordinance appointing a director and an alternate director to represent the village of Lake Bluff on the Central Lake County Joint Action Water Agency. Is there a motion to approve this ordinance?
So moved.
Thank you. Second.
Second?
Thank you. Pursuant to an intergovernmental agreement that established the Central Lake County Joint Action Water Agency, the village is required to appoint one director and one alternate director to serve on the agency board. Both positions must be filled by an elected official of the village for a term expiring April 30, 2023. Kathleen O'Hara was appointed in June 2013 to serve as director, and Mark Duarte was appointed in June 2011 to serve as alternate director. Village President Charlo recommends appointment of himself as director and of trustee Taryn Fisher as alternate director. It is recommended the board consider waiving second reading of the ordinance. Questions?
I'm glad Taryn would like to serve alongside you on the CLC JAWA board, or liaison, or however you say it.
Taryn is not here, so we really cannot, but it took some arm twisting around.
She's excited about it.
Oh, that's
She's
awesome.
excited.
Great.
That's great.
She already toured the water plant and she's,
Oh, she's awesome. I do thank Taryn for the record. She's awesome. Any questions? It is very late, thank you very much.
It is very late.
So, hearing none, this is a,
Let's vote on first reading.
it's voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? This ordinance passes first reading.
Need a motion to
Is there a
waive
motion to waive
second
second
reading
reading?
and adopt the
Oh.
ordinance.
Could I please entertain a motion to waive a second reading?
So moved.
So, second.
Thank you.
Roll call.
And so it's a roll call. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Trustee Inkeman.
Aye.
Trustee Brienne.
Aye.
Trustee Markey. Aye. Trustee Rappin.
Aye.
Thank you. The ordinance passes. Next is item 23 of the trustees' report. Do any trustees wish to make a report tonight?
No one has a report?
2 or 3 things I'd like.
Thank you very much. Next is item 24, or do we have an executive
No,
session?
sir.
We do not have an executive session. So next item is item 25, the adjournment. I would welcome a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second.
Second?
Thank you. And for all in favor, say aye.
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 So, and we're adjourned.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Good meeting. Thank you, Regis.